Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Sometimes Adriana wondered maybe her mom had given birth to her for nothing. It never crossed her mom's mind. On the contrary, she praised. Everyone advised her to get rid of the child. No profession, no job, no roof over her head, but she never lets a cigarette out of her mouth. Almost every day she gets drunk in one company or another. She stays the night where she drank. Yes. Does she even know who is the father of her unborn child? Not a wench, who she herself calls bikers. And people talk about such brave people who ride their motorcycles on the roads. And they say, shuddering meat. At what speed, if something happens, you can't gather guests. And I spit on everyone and gave birth to you, proudly said my mother, Miranda. And it must be said that she had a baby. Miranda has settled down nicely. No, in other people's eyes, she's still the same unattached person. Compared to her old self, the change was dramatic. Miranda and her daughter had taken up residence in the caravan. In the housing trailer was not a friend of the owner of the campground. There were different housing for those who are richer than mom, wooden houses, simplified versions of the cheapest, where you could settle trailers. The first thing that Adriana remembered in her life, such an old trailer, she was crawling on a disassembled bed. All around, windows left and right in the back, and even overhead. And in front on both sides are lockers. If they have doors open, she shared. 2 rooms on one half, Adriana on the other half, where there is a table and 2 chairs. Miranda is alone or with any of the guests. They drink beer and listen to music. Sometimes the Marcus falls asleep on a padded chair, dropping his head on the table. If it rains, he drums on the metal lodge. There you are sitting in a tin can and you're being hosed down. But the worst is if it's cold outside. Here are the heavy blankets and the survivors warm themselves under them. Adriana sleeps in a jacket and still wakes up at night from the fact that she is cold. Can't feel her arms or legs. She learned early to turn on the boiling pot, warms her tea in a half-liter jar. Some fringe commission would have killed Miranda for good. The child did not do everything that children are strictly forbidden to do. Grips the scepter jar with a towel, pours himself into a cup, gets drunk on his mom and puts her to bed. And if any of mom's friends get the urge to talk, Time sits in front of the TV6, listens obediently and nods. And some overgrown bearded man in Denmark with skulls sympathizes and strokes her head. And the ruling man will take a chocolate bar out of his pocket. Adriana went to school when they moved. A mother of someone's dead daughter, because Adriana never met her grandparents. Had an inheritance. Miranda left for a few days, entrusting her daughter to friends who lived in the same neighborhood. Adriana recalled sitting around the fire with them until late at night. She was a remarkably obedient child, and later she wondered why. Not in Miranda, she went to the character that not only do not put your finger in your mouth, she did not know any restraint. Perhaps it was the father, about whom Miranda never once dropped a word to her daughter. He was a quiet and shy young man. That shyness became the only thing she left as a legacy to Adriana. Miranda returned the same as ever. Her stamp had died. She did not grieve. On the contrary, she was unaccustomedly excited, and said that they were now going to buy a room for themselves. The deal went through very quickly, and it wasn't 2 weeks before they moved in. It had been a blow to Adriana. She reflected on it all later when she was older. Probably the money her mother had been given was very little and only enough for such a place to live. The oldest stock of the house, which no one will ever repair, is easier to demolish. A room of 15 square meters, gloomy palaces on all sides, surrounded by the same shabby houses. The entrance is shabby. It's like a horror movie. A long, narrow corridor painted blue. Chassis is falling off in places and 8 doors. 6 rooms. Shared kitchen and restroom. A bathroom so horribly filthy that none of the tenants ever tried to do anything about it. Maybe the others went somewhere else to bathe. Adriana remembered her mom washing in a basin in her room. And then those who lived downstairs would come to complain that they had a wet spot on the ceiling. It was cramped and cold, but there was nature all around. Mom's friends were there. And here it's gloomy, the sun never peaks on the north side, and there's not a blade of grass in the yard. At home, there are mean aunts all around. One of them was counting on buying the room Miranda took from her for a pittance. And that same aunt hated her new daughter. Miranda, you could always bullshit. You went into the kitchen without fear. The other women sensed it, and this one can do anything. She'll take a mitt, and a light to the forehead, only a buzz will go off. Letter in her presence only pressed her lip, showing that she is a stranger to them, and will never become her own. And Adriana was afraid to go out into the corridor, and not even to warm up poison for herself. She ate cold what her mother left her, like a mouse, sneaking to the toilet and back again and sitting on the wide windowsill. Sits and peeks out. Is Miranda coming? What else is there to do? Adriana couldn't read at that time. She didn't have any. Miranda had no books and no TV. Now it seemed to Adriana that it was always raining outside the window. But of course it couldn't be like that. It was just the mood though, as if it was always raining and slushy. When it was time to go to school, her mother took Adriana to the nearest school, the one in the next yard. At that time, Miranda was already working in a wine and tincture store. It wasn't really a store, but a kind of bar. Of course, there were also those who came in for takeaway wine. Miranda poured it from small kegs into plastic bottles, but they were always sticking out. Here, at high tables, men bought wine, and more often tinctures. They talked among themselves for hours, and there was such a smell in the air that you didn't need to ask anyone. It was clear that everyone was drunk. On a platter were lollipops, small ones in brightly colored wrappers. They were free for anyone who bought a drink as an appetizer. But that kind of snack never tempted the men. And Miranda brought Adriana these candies every night. But with the school uniforms, it was a bummer. Friends occasionally gave her something that their own children had grown out of. Miranda didn't know anything about it at all. To her, these things were from another planet. She herself wore jeans so ripped that sometimes she would fall through a hole in a pant leg and t-shirts with provocative inscriptions. It was good that at work it was necessary to wear a deaf robe on top, because from what was written on Miranda across her chest, sometimes even men began to blush and blink. But before taking her daughter to school, Miranda took out of the bag some dark dress, twirled it over the top, and decided that it was quite suitable for school. And the shoes over there are still quite intact, not falling apart. The only thing Miranda bought for her daughter was a very beautiful bow, like a huge butterfly, with white ribbons like curls coming down from it. Adriana spent the whole evening looking at it. She was afraid to breathe on it. Miranda didn't even think of a bouquet for her teacher. September 1st was a disaster for Adriana. She was too different from the other guys that came dressed up in all the new crisp, ogled schoolyard, drowned in flowers, sounded cheerful music, and Adriana stood red with embarrassment. And in her eyes searched despair. One of the girls who happened to be with her, next to her, clutched her nose. It stinks though. Adriana didn't smell it herself, but maybe she picked up the scent of the old house. Or maybe it was the smell of the bundle of things that one of her mom's friends had brought, and where Miranda had pulled the dress from. Adriana couldn't remember if her mom had washed it or not. But it was worth it to say such one girl, as all the future classmates began to defiantly shuffle away from Adriana. It was a game to them. The same continued after the classroom lineup. I won't sit with her. And me, Nina, she stinks. Jesus. The young teacher's head was already spinning. Okay, what's your name? Let Adriana stay here alone for a while. Teacher, I had a lot of things to do. She had to tell the kids what to bring to class tomorrow. Answer questions from the parents, the table at the door. And yet, when everyone was leaving, she stopped Adriana, who wanted to slip away unnoticed. Wait, tell Mom to buy you back today. I'll wash your clothes. And tell her to be more careful tomorrow and start looking after yourself. You don't want everyone laughing at you. On top of Adriana's misfortune, her bow and her main treasure were stolen. Coming home, the girls sobbed until the evening. Talking to Miranda did not lead to anything. The mother threatened to come to school and kick out all those who hurt her daughter. They wouldn't say a second time, she assured her. That's the 10th way around. And she couldn't imagine what her life would be like if everyone started going around her even the second road, or the third, not the 10th. "Teach me how to do laundry," she asked her mother quietly. "Well, and ironing too." Soon the girl was fully able to take care of herself. Now she stood for a long time in front of a small mirror, looking at herself from all sides. Whether all the button caught did not prevent the skirt from looking neat. It had become her mania. But whether the first impression was the strongest, or whether the smell of the old house was ineradicable, Adriana was never able to make any friends at school. She was shunned by everyone. She did not study better or worse than others. She did her lessons as diligently as she watched her clothes and brought fours faithfully. Once in a while we interspersed and triples, if the control was given, too difficult. And the teacher with a clear conscience stopped paying attention to her. The girl is quiet, inconspicuous girl does not get twos. Nana, of course, saw that in the eyes of the whole class Adriana became an outcast. She tried several times to talk to the children about how important it is to live in friendship, and that in a good team no one should be left out. But our conversations had no effect on the kids, and the teacher stepped in. It was easier that way. She reassured herself about the fact that there is no hand-wringing in her class, and no one beats Adriana, and that she was not loved. It's impossible to make people love her. In addition, the girl behaves quite reasonably, does not pester classmates, does not seek their favor. She seems to have accepted her loneliness. Probably finish her studies, and then will go to some technical school or college. Maybe they'll treat her differently. Has Adriana completely faded away? No one had ever heard her laugh, knew nothing about her life outside of school. Not once had she raced with the other girls. It went unnoticed by everyone. It happened when Adriana entered 6th grade. Later, she asked herself why she did it. The principal had instituted new rules at the school, and the cafeteria was no longer open. Now you could only buy a full lunch. First, second, third. There were families where parents thought it was expensive and stopped giving their children money for food. In the morning breakfast, and well, they said to their children, "And come after school, you will have a home-cooked lunch." It got a nerve. At school, they only make money. What happened in practice? By noon, those children who stopped going to the canteen were already hungry for a snack and asked their classmates to bring a couple of pieces of bread to the canteen. Yes, the cook swears it's unnoticeable. Adriana hadn't eaten with everyone since 1st grade. She didn't want to be attacked in the cafeteria. She convinced Miranda that the food at school was bad. So her mother started putting something for her to eat. A sandwich, an apple. And that day, Adriana just felt sorry for her classmate Sophia, a girl from a dysfunctional family with many children. Sophia, as usual, asked the boys for bread, and they all refused. When the class was empty, Adriana took sandwiches out of her bag. "I'll have 2. Sophia took the treat, brought it to her mouth, then grimaced defiantly and ran to throw the sandwich in the trash. "What stinks? Did you find it in a dumpster?" The sandwich only smelled like Krakow sausage, but Adriana imagined what would happen next. Sophia would come back from the cafeteria and tell everyone that the stinker wanted to poison her. Slipped a sandwich she found at the dump, and the whole class will be happy to pick up the Nunenka. All the fun in the middle of a long day filled with boring lessons. And for Adriana, this was probably the last straw. She thought Sophia was a kind of outcast too, always poorly dressed. And her scandalous mother comes almost every week to argue with the teacher and the boys. And it all seems that her daughter is being abused. That's why Sophia is disliked in the class and tries not to get in touch with her. And now she's decided to get popular at Adriana's expense for leading the bullying that's already started. My head hurts. Threw Adriana the teacher, bumping into her in the doorway, and didn't give her a chance to stop herself, afraid she'd burst into tears in front of everyone. She hadn't done that in a long time. But then she finally collapsed. Adriana ran out of the school, tightening her coat as she went, thinking only that it was Friday and she wouldn't see her nasty classmates until Monday. Miranda arrived late as usual. Her store closed at 11, and she was home by midnight. Sometimes jokingly stating that every day was like a holiday, considering that more and more often she ended the day cheerful. It was believable. She started with a light artillery of apple and cherry cider, and sometimes even drank champagne, and ended with cognac. A true wine connoisseur would have been head over heels for that stuff. But Miranda, at the present moment of her life, was fine, and there were no traces of excesses on her face yet. She still resembled a Frenchwoman. Loose hair, light eyes under the wings of her eyebrows, thick silk, a laughing mouth. Quite a few customers came not only to have a drink, but also to chat with Miranda and treat her, of course. Usually by the time her mother arrived, Adriana was asleep on the stove. Miranda was waiting. No surprise dinner, boiled potatoes, fried cutlets, spoon or macaroni and cheese. But on the table, without fail, there was a lamp burning. It was the only thing Miranda had taken from the maternity ward. Or maybe it belonged to her grandmother too. It was a snow-covered marble house with small windows on 3 sides of the world. Adriana was used to falling asleep looking at it, and it seemed that she was not alone in the room. And whoever was now sitting there in the hut was also brooding and dreaming and waiting for her to come through the door. But I can't. I am too big, he is too small, and we will always wait for each other. Adriana thought. Miranda's heart snapped when she saw that the room was dark and the earpiece was off. She slammed her palm on the light switch. There was no doubt there was trouble. God forbid. Adriana knew she was missing at home. She was greatly relieved to see her daughter sitting in the old armchair by the window, albeit crying, but alive here. The fatigue returned. What's wrong? She asked but already only sobs dragged. You can hear it thinly. Come on, Miranda ruffled her hair. She didn't have the energy now to pry into her daughter's soul, to find out why she was in a bad mood. I just wanted to lie down and sleep, and the floor beneath her feet shook slightly. Adriana knew that her mother would not have a heart-to-heart talk with her. She never had, and she never would now. Can I get someone, she asked. In her mind, she said it all, that she couldn't be alone anymore, that she didn't have a single friend, and no longer had the strength to bear the ridicule of the whole world against her. From the looks of it, Miranda wondered, You mean like a puppy or a kitten? Adriana nodded, continuing to stare out the dark window where the rain was running down. Animals were so out of Miranda's range of interest that it took her a moment to concentrate, as if she'd been given a difficult math problem to solve. Well, I don't know, she mused doubtfully. The neighbors probably chewed us out completely then. No, but the girl looked at her mother with those suffering such eyes. That Miranda first noticed from Adriana, only those huge eyes remained. Then the kitten with him at least do not need to walk. You will be less likely to be seen by those harmful grandmothers. So cats don't bark or chew on shoes. She said yes. Adriana hugged her, snuggled up to her, breathed out her native scent. She has no one but her mom. And Miranda's heart ached. How thin is her daughter? She'll never ask me. Yes, she does. She forgets about it. Maybe I'll get her some. They used to give children kewurs when they were bleeding. The other day was Saturday, so there was a chance on weekends at the town market. They were selling all sorts of animals: abalone, aquarium, noya, fish, birds, cats, dogs. Adriana didn't have much money. She was saving a little bit from the bills that gave her to go to the nearest grocery store. But the girl knew that it wasn't uncommon for native animals to be given away for free to good hands. Miranda was still asleep when Adriana slipped out of the apartment after a quick cup of coffee. To keep her mother from worrying, she left a note, went to the market, and put it by the electric kettle. Miranda did the same. The first thing she did in the morning was drink coffee, so all sorts of things will be seen. Of course, the most tempting thing is the unattainable. For the 5th time, Adriana walked past a lady who had a white poodle sitting behind her back. I didn't know he was for sale. He was sure the owner, his family. They are once stuck in this strange place and will go home. The owner peeked out from under his jacket, his sharp nose looking around with curiosity. The landlady was asking for a lot of money. Maybe the puppy would go home this time. There'd be no one willing to take him for that price. Cats, as it turned out, weren't doing so well. They were offering pedigree cats. It was clear that Adriana didn't have enough money for either the Semstvo or that Persian. But a man who was passing by winked at Adriana. Do you want one? Little one, I'll send you these in the nearest yard to catch at least in a sack. Adriana shook her head and backed away fearfully. Even though Miranda had friends, she had firmly instilled in her daughter that you shouldn't go anywhere with strange children offering you a puppy or a kitten. And then she saw her old lady sitting a little farther away from everyone. She was dressed in such a way that she was attracted by some old vest, vicious silver fur, green hat with a green pie. Adriana had never seen anyone wear a hat with a feather in her life. Except in fairy tales, the old lady also had round glasses. She looked like an old intellectual who was a little crazy or a little drunk. That was something Adriana was good at. In front of the old lady was a cage of rats, 4 of them. The white rats lived their own lives, paying little attention to people or to what was going on around them. "Come here," the old woman said. Adriana didn't even immediately realize it was for her. But even a crazy grandmother is not a stranger. Adriana timidly approached. "Give me your hand," the old woman said. She took Adriana's hand and opened the window in the cage. "Hold out your hand to the rats. Don't be afraid, they won't bite. Girls." I wanted to say that she didn't need a rat, and in general she was afraid. Adriana was too timid and more often than not preferred not to object. When her palm found itself in the cage, the rats were interested, reaching to cash in. Adriana could barely keep from shrieking and yanking her hand away from their tiny wet noses and the sharp yellow of their teeth. But then one of the rats jumped right into her palm. "Take it," said the old lady. "Give me some money." "What have you got? What's a nickel?" "All right, come on." The old lady began to rummage through her clothes. Whether the pocket where she wanted to hide the coin was somewhere deep, at least under 20 sweater. "But I don't want a rat. I don't like rats." "Adriana don't like, but you need that rat," said the old woman. She emphasized the last words in her voice, and Adriana, again, did not dare to argue. "Is it a girl or a boy?" Adriana asked hopelessly. "It is. It's probably both." The old woman thought for a moment. She was crazy. She had no choice. "What's the name?" Adriana didn't add his or hers. "Riches. And now I'm left with 1 boy and 2 girls." "That's right. His name is Talent and theirs is Power and Love. And at home I have more luck and health and happiness." The old woman was already muttering something to herself, sinking back into thoughtfulness. Had with her a purse sewn from multicolored. We had planned to carry the kitten home in it. Now the rat was on his way. All the way he was unusually quiet. Only in the shuttle bus, when Adriana held the purse on her lap, she felt that in it there was something soft and heavy, sticky and moving. Adriana sighed and imagined what the guys would say if they found out that Adriana was friends with a rat none other than the rat herself would nickname her. The other thing was that she wouldn't tell anyone about her pet. And how else would her mom feel about him? "Oh, God, gross, throw it away," Miranda shouted. Adriana clutched the bag to his chest. If anything, dealing with the rat was a simple matter of tossing it into the nearest dumpster. And that was it. Either it would take root there, or the first window it hit would break it. But Adriana couldn't throw away a living thing. "Did you pay money for it too?" Mom looked at Adriana compassionately like a miserable nickel. The girl whispered. Miranda sighed as deeply as if she was trying to hold back sobs. "Okay," she said, standing up. "That thing is going to need a cage, isn't it?" Probably, Adriana agreed with a guilty look. A cage was an extra expense. She was well aware of that. "I think I saw an old bird cage in the basement. Sit down. I'll get it myself. I know you're afraid to go in there." The basement was all through the house, damp and dark. Every tenant had a storeroom or carcass down there. The basement smelled of guts and pickles. Adriana was afraid to go there even with her mom and a flashlight. Miranda had actually seen a dusty old cage there. Maybe it belonged to someone, or maybe the owner had long since died or moved away. Miranda was ready to scramble. If someone decided to take that cage away from her, or at the very least, pay her. After all, the rat was the only thing her daughter had asked of her. "Here," said Miranda, bringing the cage into the room. With a wet rag, she dusted it. "I really hope this thing escapes from it and jumps into your bed in the morning," said Adriana, and went to wash the rat's apartment. "What is Rat's name?" Adriana decided not to tell her mother. Miranda was able to laugh absolutely mercilessly at times. At such moments, the girl made a vow to herself that she would not tell her mother again. Nothing, ever. She swore many times. The first time she broke her vow. The rat escaped the next day in the evening. Adriana sat late at night near the cage, held out the breadcrumbs to the whelp, and he took them with flexible legs, with long pink fingers, and chewed so appetizingly that Adriana almost forgave her new friend the fact that he was a rat. I guess so. She could carry him in her arms. In time, when she got used to it. And first thing in the morning, Adriana rushed to the cages and saw that it was empty. Only in one place were the bars a little loose. Adriana gasped in grief. He had escaped. She had never raised her voice. And here straight shouted, "Who ran away with me?" And Miranda rose up on the bed. That thing, thank God. And collapsed back on her pillow to sleep. Is that what you wished for her? Adriana burst into tears for the second time in 2 days. You wished her away. You brought that broken cage. Miranda silently placed one of the pillows on her head so that her daughter's cries would not disturb her sleep. Adriana rushed to search the apartment. She foresaw that if she didn't find a rat in the room, she would have to go to the hallway, to the kitchen, to the neighbors. And after asking if our rat had run in, she and her mom would be fine if they didn't get evicted. Adriana even looked into the hut. Suddenly the rat liked the hut and decided to live there. But inside the marble hut was empty. Only a small light bulb was cold. Not in the closet, not under the couch, not in the dresser anywhere. There was no wealth anywhere. Adriana lay down on the floor and looked under the old nightstand left by the previous owners. And there in the wall was a hole, a black hole with smooth edges, just like Georgians with someone's sharp bags. Mom, give me the flashlight phone. Are you gonna let me sleep or not? Miranda's totally pissed off. God, 1 day a week. Get off, get off, get off. She tried to get comfortable in bed so that she could go back to sleep, but there was no way she could do it. Adriana and her phone were already in Crazen's eyes, and damn it, there seemed to be glimpses of someone's eyes, or maybe teeth, deep down there. Adriana, you found your rat without grabbing it with your bare hands. Miranda's resigned to the futility of her attempts to sleep. She pulls you to wring your hand with my scarf. You'd think in that little hole. She'll be able to slip her hand around a muddy, thick, dirty scarf. It would be good to at least walk like that again. Forgetting her fear, Adriana dived her hand into the resulting hole. It was unexpectedly deep and there. Yes, there was a soft, warm body, rats, and something else. Some object with hard edges. But in the same instant, Adriana realized that it was impossible to try to get it out now because her mother would intervene. And then whatever was found, there would be Mommy's first and foremost. But after all, it wasn't him who was being bullied at school, it wasn't her who was sobbing. So he didn't have the strength to breathe. The breath came out like a moan. It wasn't her who drove to the market at dawn and talked to the crazy old lady. Adriana had only pulled a rat out of the burrow. There it is. Or did it hide and sit there quietly? Found it. Well, calm down. I'll fix the cage and then maybe we'll get him a glass aquarium. Miranda reluctantly walked barefoot across the floor. A new day was beginning. War herself didn't quite understand why she had put off her exploration of Brandy until the next day. She wished she was home alone. Maybe then a miracle would happen. And if not, and in a beautiful hole will be some nonsense, for example. For example, the same old truth, ajar, and even empty. Then there will be no one to laugh at it with hopes like a little child. And all Sunday afternoon, Adriana looked anxiously at her mother. Would she not start cleaning? Would she scrub the floors, pushing the furniture aside? But Miranda cleaned purely on inspiration, and it had not visited her today. She was once again on the subject of the dirty bathroom after going in there, wanting to chlorine Miranda. It had been a day when she didn't like everything around her, and the shabby kitchen was always crowded with these gossipy women. And outside the window is such a dreary, hopeless landscape that you want to become Raskolnikov, as in Dostoevsky's novel, and grab an axe. Eventually, Miranda wrapped the curtains and settled down again. This time, though, to watch a movie. Tropics, endless beaches, young, beautiful characters, love like no other. This was what was dear to Miranda's heart, and what carried her from the gloomy slush of fall to the world she wanted to be in. Now everything around her seemed amazing. She was doing the usual things, cooking soup on the stove, washing dishes, doing her homework, and everything was going well for her. If she had been home alone, she would have been humming as well. Miranda had told her daughter 100 times that she had no voice and no ear. But sometimes singing isn't about musicality at all. It's about a state of mind. Rat was behaving quite normally, no longer trying to escape. He often rose on his hind legs, held on to the bars of the cage with his front ones, and watched what Adriana was doing. And the girl felt as if she had a conspirator in the family. The next day it was time to go to school. Usually Adriana saw Monday as an Egyptian execution. There was still a whole week ahead of her, full of endless lessons. And most importantly, bullying, classmates, and general rejection. But now the girl lived with one thing: when she would return and be home alone. What will happen then? She thought only about it. And it seemed so detached, immersed in his thoughts. It was as if it did not exist. And her classmates began to tease the dummy for the first time. It wasn't interesting at all. The teacher was trying to find out why Adriana had run away on Friday without waiting for the end of class. Sophia stayed nearby and behaved very defiantly. She thought Adriana would complain about her and prepared to fight back, using all kinds of arguments. "It's not my fault that Vanechka eats garbage. Just don't offer them to me." But Adriana only shrugged her shoulders at the teacher's questions. "I don't remember why I left. I think I had a headache. You should have gone to the school nurse." "Well, I'll do that next time." But as soon as the last bell rang, Adriana was gone. She told herself she was just worried about the rat. How he'd be all day without her. She was afraid to admit to herself that she had put everything on the line. She expects to find something extraordinary in the rat's hole, and just can't bear to be disappointed. The rat greeted her with some strange sound reminiscent of Vanya's quiet Paris. It was as if he was tired of waiting and was rushing her. But now Adriana was in a hurry too, even though she knew for sure that Miranda would not come before 12 o'clock in the morning. Adriana only threw off her jacket, and then with an effort pushed the massive old nightstand away from the wall, looked at the rat hanging opposite the cage, and ran her hand down the hole. Deep to her elbow moments later, she had already extracted the box into the light. She sat down directly on the floor and began to examine it, noticing that her hands were trembling. The casket was of injured metal. A pattern appeared between the edges. The lock was obviously nothing a new fingernail could pick up and flip off. But Adriana slowly, although inside there was clearly something lying, she turned the box over and saw the date 1865 engraved on the bottom. Clearly the box had been made then. But the house where she and her mother lived now wasn't that old. Adriana wondered for the first time who had lived in this room before her, and why he had thought to brick up the box in the wall and take it away afterward. Maybe something tragic had gotten in the way, and he hadn't had the time. Adriana took a deep breath, effortlessly managed the lock, and left the lid. That's where her breath broke. The tale continued. Indeed, someone had decided to entrust eternity with jewelry, rings, and a brooch of artistic work with large stones. The bracelet seemed to be made of sparkling lace. So delicate was the metallic ligature of the pattern, and so many of the shouting stones carried away a strand of pearls. But it was the simple oval pendant that caught Adriana's attention. It was shaped like the same box in miniature and just as easy to open. And inside was, yes, it was a portrait, an antique miniature, a child. Adriana couldn't even tell if it was a boy, a girl, black curls, a white shirt, and the look of big eyes, at once helpless, trusting, and commanding. Adriana realized everything she would give her mom, just not this. She fumbled around the room and didn't immediately realize where to hide the thing. She had her own stash, randomly appearing. Her mom had bought her a cheap writing utensil made of blue plastic. The top was glued on top, also plastic, only a white profile. Adriana put her pens in a special hole. And then she found out that if she pulled it, a small, almost flat drawer would slide out, and then she could hide various small things. And Miranda would be looking for it for the rest of her life. Adriana hid the pendant and then snatched the rat out of the cage and kissed its tiny wet nose, forgetting about the long yellow teeth and the noticeable odor. "Thank you." When Miranda got home, Adriana was awake. She was sitting by the table, and on it stood an open jewelry box. If eyes can burn with excitement, Adriana's eyes were burning. "Why didn't you lie down?" "Easy?" Miranda was surprised and walked over to the table. "What have you got there?" Oh, for a few moments. It looked like weak eyes, glassy or mouth open. Adriana hurriedly explained everything, but in a context acceptable to her mom. Not about the old lady, not about the rats. She didn't even mention it. She said she was cleaning the floor and something got caught. There was a hole in the wall and it was in there. And there it was. Miranda let out a scream. She screamed. It could only be like that in her youth when she was riding her bike like a gorilla. This immediately caused a reaction in the communal apartment. The walls resounded on both sides, and a couple of moments later, also behind the drums or at the door. What happened? What was murdered? Call the police. Evict the hell out of them. Miranda responded with a long, florid phrase that had only 2 censored words, old purses, and the rest a recommended route. Where was this purse suggested to go? After that, she called one of her many friends on the phone. "Drop everything and get over here. You don't want to throw a pillow. And I'm your subject here, such Satsuki. Do not ask where this 1001 night." From excitement, Miranda began to swear again, so that Adriana did not understand her at all. The residents of the communal apartment did not manage to sleep that night. One shock after another awaited them. First came a bitterly ambitious man about 40 years old, which the old ladies could see only in a terrible dream. 2-meter-tall, broad-shouldered, and all kinds of metal gimmicks, jackets, bearded with a chicken-low voice, old ladies, immediately trembling counter, knocked down the kitchen and called the police. While the guards of order rode, bitterly had time to appreciate the treasures found. Harmless Jaundice is waiting for the wench. "Miranda, don't worry, we'll soon talk it over." He disappeared before the police arrived and took the box with him behind his back. Miranda had been monstrously thoughtless in entrusting what she thought was a real treasure to an old acquaintance. Adriana might have asked her mother to be more careful, but now she saw the treasure as something almost irrelevant to her. Her mother wouldn't have found the metal anyway. When the police arrived, 2 young boys. They had to content themselves with choking old women's speeches about that one time. A companion and 5 fingers pointed ominously at the smirking. And Miranda in the middle of the night taking to her various criminal-type personalities, not embarrassed by the child. Miranda was apparently euphoric. "Would you boys like a drink?" She offered her named guests a drink. They did draw up the paper and sometimes labor to her. It was the first time in her memory that men in uniform had come. She was afraid her mother would be taken away. But Miranda nonchalantly spun away and with a sweet smile. She saw the policemen off like best friends. "What will happen now?" Adriana asked in a trembling voice. "We'll probably pay the fine." Miranda yawned and finally got undressed for the night. "All that stuff. Go to sleep, kitten." Now a new life begins. Much later, Adriana realized that her mother had decided not to make the fine public, but to sell it really through her semi-criminal friends, and really not deceived in the sense that she got even more than she accounted on. Agoric had probably gotten his hands pretty good, but Miranda was satisfied. Adriana never found out exactly how much money her mother had received, but Miranda immediately went with her daughter to the realtors to buy a new apartment, and she acted like a visiting star. In fact, that was all they had enough for. An apartment in a new house, which the mother and daughter both considered. The posh house stood in an upscale neighborhood. There was a rooftop garden and a concierge sitting in the entryway. And Miranda had also bought herself a car, not a new one, as she said, a posh one too. There were a few other little things though, clothes for both of them. And to add to the exuberance, Miranda had a new job. The same David must have been very good at arranging things. And in gratitude tried, arranged Miranda, as not young, very strange character knew one writer. Miranda became his house ruler or something, and in time, his real right-hand woman. It was hard to imagine that she would be suitable for this role, not so well educated, far from being an ideal hostess. She was, however, a good fit. The writer found Miranda amusing, and she did not annoy him at all. The two were a perfect match. Miranda ordered the game that the writer liked. If there was a cleanup job to be done, she'd call the guys from the clinics and the company to keep herself clean. But the writer somehow decided that he needed such a woman in the house, who did not take anything to heart and felt his mood, could be silent all day long, or told various tales that switched with her. In everyday life, the writer was not demanding, only that strong coffee was always at hand. And in the evenings, when Miranda went home, she always left a filled thermos for him. "You'll make your heart race," she warned him. They were almost immediately on a first-name basis, as if they weren't master and servant, buddies. The writer only waved it off. "You should live as if you were riding a motorcycle. Like you told me the other day, if he crashes at such a speed, you won't have to suffer for long. You'll go straight to heaven." Miranda was squinting. Or hell. What could be even more fun? As one good poet Kersakov wrote, "Preparing for. Have a James Harley Davidson and a Derek at the entrance with you. But still, trust me. In every atom, there is a mystery, standing more often than serpents, and one who will one day point himself at the door. Prepare to smoke forever in the fire of the furnace. Prepare yourself. Recall Lily, your sorrow. In every hell there's sweat, saka, bushel, keys, night conversations with sugar, black tea." Miranda nodded and quietly feigned the door behind her. The writer's future did not concern her. What about Adriana? Her mother had immediately taken her out of her old school, not because she wanted to spare the girl from the classmates who had poisoned her for so many years. It's just that there was an equally elite school next to an elite house, and Adriana was enrolled there. It's the closest commute. The school's in the courtyard. You could look out the window to see if the lights were on in your classroom in the morning or not. And it was impossible to imagine that any of the students would be harassed. A class of 15 kids, all roughly well-mannered, and a teacher who looks like Mary Poppins, above everyone. But before that, Adriana could have an hour of triumph if she wanted it. Together with her mother, they went to the school to pick up their papers. It had come to light that their little family had gotten rich. True, no one knew exactly how, but they were walking down the school corridors, Miranda and Adriana in a cool mat, as Sophia told me later, choking on the excess of emotion. "Do you know how much such a jacket costs? Boots, it's awesome in general. Come to think of it, Adriana's not up to it now." Adriana heard that whisper that accompanied her and her mother, but walked on without raising her eyes. She knew she would never willingly stay at this school, even if she started being carried in her arms. And triumphing over those who had wronged her was not something she wanted. Hurry up and get her papers and forget about this place. That's all. In the new school, she was so calm, as if she was surrounded by children from another planet, where there were no such feelings as anger, envy, bullying. If she asked questions, she was greeted with friendly answers from several girls who showed with all their behavior that they were not averse to be friends with her. And the teacher sincerely tried to make Adriana understand the new topic and cope with the control work. The past gradually began to be forgotten. Adriana was surprised to feel a heart itch. Everything was weakening. Some joys of life came to the forefront. She noted that she now behaves like an ordinary girl asking her mother to go with her to the store for this or that cover. From time to time, she stays overnight with one of her new friends and tapes up her room with posters of one of the trendy rock bands. When she moved on to high school, the writer died. And since he had no loved ones, he left a will that passed everything to Miranda, including royalties from his books. Adriana and her mother moved again, now to the deceased's country house. Miranda decided to rent the apartment for the time being. "When you graduate from school and become of age, it will belong to yourself," Miranda promised her daughter. Adriana didn't want to change schools, and now Miranda took her to the start of classes every morning in her new car. Shortly after the writer died and Miranda's inheritance, the rat died as well. It was already a long-lived animal. Miranda didn't recognize the mystery of the animal and didn't understand why her daughter was trying her best to save him. as Adriana tearfully returned from the vet. The rat had grown a large tumor, and surgery only briefly prolonged his days. Shortly after, the rat did not Miranda in a fit of cleaning, and for putting things in order gained just that with gusts. Threw away the old writing utensil along with the antique column. Adriana had not intended to reveal her secret to her mother, but now in desperation she told her what she had lost. Unfortunately, she didn't notice the loss until the next day, and the company that was responsible for cleaning the bins had already cleared their trash, removed early in the morning. A giddy Miranda waved her hand. "We're not going to go through the entire city dump. It's a shame, of course, but that's the way it is." Nothing can be too precious, and Adriana accepted it, though she never told her mother that it wasn't really the jewelry that she was sorry for, but the portrait, no matter how much it cost. In the meantime, the person depicted in the miniature had become her own. When her friends started talking about, Adriana's boy, she thought, though it was silly and childish with the one who looked at her from the portrait with big black eyes. They were hopelessly separated in time. That was all. Since then, there were no money-related surprises in their family, but they lived more than prosperously. The writer's books kept coming out, and the bank account kept growing. If Miranda had been accustomed to luxury, she would have successfully spent everything. But she still made do with a rather modest amount, and decided to save the rest for her daughter. At the graduation party, Adriana got drunk for the first time in her life. Former classmates seemed to have thrown off their decency and masks. Young men and women partied in a way they couldn't afford before. Fortunately, it did not have bad consequences for Adriana. She merely fell asleep at dawn and woke up in the evening, popping a headache pill with a cup of coffee. She studied when she was no longer interfered with perfectly and got into the institute without any problems. Miranda didn't approve of her choice. She herself would never go to biology, but she didn't want to get in the way. Better something creative, she sighed. Variety Show Business Literary Institute. Adriana looked at her like a little mom. "But I don't have the aptitude." "Well, yes, but some people manage to make it without any ability. It's just a different life out there. It just picks you up and carries you along. Vivid experiences, interesting people. What's in store for you? You'll spend your life going to the same job in the morning and coming home in the evening. You won't even realize you're trying. I don't know. When you're surrounded by routine, life goes by really fast. 10 years is like a blink of an eye. But why one job? Well, not just one is better. I'd like to find my own business and never give it up." In her 4th year of university, she got married. Adriana didn't want to go anywhere. Going away for the summer would be enough for her practice. She would have preferred to spend the last summer months at home. To sleep well, to lie in the garden with a book and a can of Coca-Cola, to listen to music, and click at least on the phone at all the acquaintances she hadn't had time to see. But Miranda bought her a trip to Turkey and pushed her to vacation almost by force. "It's like you're not even my daughter. But how can you be such a bore, and about the book, and girlfriend nothing but all she kept saying." Apparently, some higher power heard Miranda. And already on the airplane, Adriana met Frank. He was a businessman, lived in the same city as her, and was also flying on vacation. At first, they stayed close to each other, as they had no other acquaintances here, and then imperceptibly became friends, and then began to spend time together. They decided to get married before Christmas. Frank said that it was the most romantic time, and indeed, everything was beautiful. And Adriana's outfit, in addition to white lace, a new dress was served with a cape for warmth, because it was to be photographed in the open air. The cape was reversed with white fur. A country restaurant in an old manor house, and a wedding trip to Prague were good. When did they celebrate Christmas in the square? There was mulled wine in their glass. Miranda was alone, but she wasn't sad at all. About the war, even her mother seemed relieved. She now considered her parental duty finally fulfilled and returned to the life she had lived before. Old friends began to visit her, and when Adriana visited her mother, she often forced a raucous party at her place. Adriana received her diploma, but further on there was a hitch for a while. Then for a young woman to go to work in a school was out of the question. "I'm going to lose you." Teaching is a 24-hour-a-day profession, and I want you to belong at least a little to me and our children." Her husband told her seriously. Adriana thought was about a nature reserve, but it would be a long drive to get there. The employees would move, a small village, build houses there or get dorm rooms. Of course, that didn't suit Frank. He couldn't give up his business. The university came together and there was no place in one of the departments. And then we'll see, as Frank said. In his heart, what he wanted most was for his wife to go on maternity leave. He himself was his parents' only son. Growing up, missing his peers and dreaming of having many children in his own family. But Adriana's pregnancy was not coming. Not immediately, but she listened to her husband's entreaties, and they both went to the doctor. Some problems were detected, like on treatment, but nothing helped. The second Adriana thought sadly of the old lady with the rats. That one, of course, was no longer in the world, or else it would be time to go to her and ask for an animal named Mother of Many Children. Then Adriana would probably give birth to 7 at once. A bitter joke. Nothing else occurred to the young woman. Frank talked about going abroad, about the doctors there. And then, as if waving his hand, he listened to the advice of an old acquaintance. "Take a child from an orphanage," she said. "It has happened many times. People will already report. They will take someone else's baby and God will give them their own. The main thing then is not to refuse to accept it." Frank tried to speak in a light tone, but it was obvious that the idea was in his heart from the point of view of all the supervisory authorities. They were ideal candidates, a young, well-to-do couple who lacked only a baby to make them happy. However, they disagreed about the baby. Frank insisted on taking a very young girl, no older than a year, so that the child had no memories of the past, and the baby considered them their real parents. But that's not fair. Adriana objected. "We'll still have to tell the foster child the truth. But why the psychological trauma?" Frank objected. "Because different things happen in life, and a son or daughter, when they grow up, has the right to pull themselves back to their roots. Some drunkard from the back alley, or to a mother who has already cursed her mistakes 100 times, some Prezik, which day after day, year after year, fate puts on the table, that very handkerchief." Frank only waved his hand, not wanting to argue further. In the orphanage, they were really advised to look first not at babies, but at least at children from the younger group, assuring that it is not a cat in a bag. Here will be seen and character and inclinations. At the same time, the children are still small enough to form an inner core, and they will get used to the new environment quickly. Behind was the collection of documents and all sorts of examinations and schools of foster parents. They stood in the playroom very bright, cozy, and around the books crowded about 20 kids in shirts and dresses with puffy tights. Some of them had their finger in their mouth. Someone got tired of looking at unfamiliar uncles and aunts and returned to the game. Frank, looking around confused, and the teacher tried to turn his gaze from one child to another. And to each one she said something nice. "Here's Nadenka. She serves herself and can make a crib. And she always helps me to put toys away in the drawer. She likes books again. He spends hours looking at the pictures. He'll probably be the first to read. A real artist. In all our concerts, she recites poems and reads. She's a very artistic girl." From time to time, Frank looked at his wife, as if asking her advice. But Adriana was silent. And then another boy came out of the bedroom, and she forgot all about it. It was a copy of the child whose portrait in the locket she had kept so long. He looked at her, and Adriana almost shrieked. The same black eyes of the kindergarten teacher noticed the boy too. "This is Alex. He doesn't speak yet, but it's all ahead of him. We're just a little behind the others." "Alex," she said with a sigh. Forgetting about her husband, Adriana approached the boy, squatted down in front of him and asked, "Let's go home." He looked her straight in the eyes and seemed to understand more than he could put into words, even if he spoke. The director of the orphanage was trying to talk them out of it, to make them choose another child. "Why would you, Alex? You can't say you fell in love with him at first sight, can you? It doesn't work that way. He's got a lot of health problems. We don't know if he'll regain his speech, how much. And there are doubts about the boy's mental capacity." Frank's hands are spread out, saying he understands, but there's nothing he can do. His wife's will, and Adriana asked as if she hadn't heard the director. He's an absolute orphan, raised by his young mother. Who's the father? She wasn't exactly sure herself, I don't think. And then she left and disappeared. So how can you be sure he's an orphan? Frank intervened. The mother might still show up and be reinstated as a parent. That's why I'm sure, the director stroked the folder on the table with her palm, that the mother's body was found a week later in the river. She drowned herself. The police say that there are no signs of violence. How horrible. Frank exhaled. He had grown up in a well-to-do family and had not come into contact with such horrors. She's not a drug addict, is she? No, she was a young girl. She was not supposed to be good at all. But how could she? Who did she leave her son for? Apparently, she was at a point where she didn't care anymore. Alex then still said his mother said goodbye to him, told him not to be sad for her and left. When he was brought to us, he was waiting for his mother to come for him. And then one of the teachers here said that his mom died. He's been quiet ever since. Now we don't know what to do with him. If he talks, we'll keep him. If not, we'll have to give him to a special boarding school. We won't have to. Adriana said it's settled. We're taking him. But you can't do that right now, can you? It doesn't work that way. We have to make the arrangements. It'll take time. How? Let's get started on the paperwork. Adriana sounded impatient. Let's get this whole thing over with. I'm sure he won't start talking here at your place, but we have good conditions. The director even took offense. Would you look at what happens in other orphanages? Adriana just waved her hand. After a rather heated discussion about the time when they could take Alex away. But why this boy? Frank asked cautiously as they drove home. Because you don't choose your children. It's my child, and that's all. She answered briefly. And Frank could only explain what had happened by saying that the woman must be feeling something. She's carrying the baby. Maybe the wife sensed something too. A sign from above. Alex did not speak for a long time. Adriana was preparing for his arrival. As Frank tried to crack jokes, literally had the whole house out. The kid's room was filled with toys and balloons. Do you think the boy lived in such conditions? Expressively asked Frank, emphasizing the word such. And you think Alex will not be happy about it? With a question to a question, Adriana answered. Frank only shrugged his shoulders. And Adriana was moved to tears when she led the baby into his room, and he froze on the threshold, not daring to cross it, looking at the bouquets of balloons and the crib from the shelves. The toys were like stepping into a fairy tale. He dared to enter only holding Adriana Soroka tightly. This is all yours, examines. Everything gets used, and then we'll have lunch, she told him. Also said a festive was and cake, and different fruits. But when Alex finished the milk from the cup, Adriana had a strange feeling. Only now she realized that this was her home and the most necessary person was near her. In the following days, various little things made her heart clench more than once. Now Adriana always took the boy whenever she went anywhere. To the grocery store, or to the store, or for a walk in the park. When she got to the supermarket, she asked Alex, "What do you want?" "To eat." He walked uncertainly along the shelves. Adriana expected Alex to choose sweets or forget about food and reach for the toys in the basket. He saw the soup sachets with the same ones you use to dilute cups of boiling water and excused himself to them like an old acquaintance. He held out a pen and then looked back at Adriana, asking if she could just nod. He took one bag and carried it in his hands to the cash register. Adriana realized that it was a puzzle of his old life and didn't want to tear it up. Since other moms bought their kids chocolates, she threw a bag of quick soup in the basket. Alex ate any pea, chicken, mushroom, cheese soup. Slowly spooning the soup, thick broken grass, the soup as a treat fished out the breadcrumbs. It was neither healthy nor healthy, but to hell with him. Walking behind Adriana like a shadow he didn't annoy, didn't give, didn't demand attention. All he needed was to make her happy. It was as if he had no energy left in him and a child who ran around, made noise, and could never settle down. So he jokingly calls him an urgy. If Adriana was reading or sewing, Alex would move next to her, put his head on the wooden cushion and stare at her uninterruptedly. His eyes were big with lashes as long as a girl's. Adriana became worried and took her foster son to the doctor. The therapist, who had to see each child for no more than 10 minutes, found the boy weakened. What kind of nutrition did he have? She advised to feed better, prescribed vitamins. And in the summer we will go to the sea, promised Adriana with her son when they left the clinic. You don't know what that is, do you? Yes. She often now had a feeling that could be described with delight and awe. She was about to open up a world to this little man, of which he had no idea, and the sea and seagulls, and cotton candy and rides, and favorite book characters. Everything he had gotten his hands on. He was making her an all-powerful sorceress. To Frank, the boy only went if the man kissed him and approached, stood obediently by his side, listened to what he was told. But as soon as Frank was silent, Alex would rush to his mother again. Adriana tried to befriend her husband and son. She asked Frank to read to the child, sent them both for a walk. But Frank did it awkwardly. It was as if he was embarrassed in his heart and fiddled with the baby through the village. Alex also felt constrained, and they parted with relief. Next to Adriana, Alex spoke imperceptibly. There was no delay. Apparently, it was just the stress he had been through. His first word was still when Adriana was reading him a book, and it ended. Her throat caught, but she pretended it wasn't a big deal and just reached for another batch of stories. Alex never talked idly, not like the other kids who could hardly keep quiet. He could take Adriana's hand and lead her. Let's go when he wanted to show her something interesting. Or asked for something he needed, let me get a drink. In the summer, they did go to the sea. And there Adriana felt for the first time that her husband was jealous of Alex. He was dissatisfied with the fact that they spend little time together, ski, baby to bed, and go somewhere together. We'll go for a walk. He'll wake up and see that no one is there, and he'll get scared. Adriana objected quietly. Come on, the children sleep soundly, leaving the boss on, and let's go. Let's walk along the waterfront. But Adriana shook her head. Go yourself, please. I'll be glad if you have fun, and you can tell me about it later. And on the beach, she was always near Alex, although before she liked to swim far into the sea, and now she was looking for shells together with the child and building sand sledges. And in excursions, they were now limited. They went only to those where the baby could be with them. You've ruined both of our vacations, Frank said in frustration a few days before we left. And I'm sorry, I don't understand this crazy attachment. I mean, it's still someone else's baby. It's no longer a stranger to me. Adriana rarely dared to confront him openly, and I think you treat your own child the same way. No, I wouldn't. Frank has been touched. I think it would have been subconsciously triggered. He'd feel that his son is the most precious thing between us. And about Alex, we agreed it was a trial run in front of our own kid. Kind of like we're relaxing and getting comfortable with the baby we already have, and then we'll be able to have our own. Adriana, looking at her husband, eyes wide open, said almost with fear, I never thought that you treat a small child as a trial balloon for an experiment. I could already see that this reception was costing both me and all my relatives combined. Frank waved his hand and turned the conversation to another topic, but Adriana saw that her husband was deeply offended. In the evening, when she was putting Alex to bed, he suddenly said, Go out with him, go out with Frank. There was a certain strangeness about it. He didn't call them Daddy, Mommy called them by their first names. Frank had said more than once that it wasn't right, they should relearn it. But Adriana had objected. Perhaps he still remembers his own mother well and realizes that we are strangers. How am I going to leave? Adriana leaned over in the crib. What about you? I will sleep, said the boy and closed his eyes. That evening, Adriana and her husband took a short walk along the waterfront. The young woman was in a hurry to get to the hotel anyway. And Alex insisted that on the last evening Adriana and Frank went to a restaurant. It was supposed to be a romantic evening. Candles on the table, a girl with a violin, young ladies, wine. They danced. Frank embraced Adriana as tenderly as in the first days of their acquaintance. Then she felt uneasy, and they left early for the hotel. The full moon was burning in the sky. It was a stunning evening, but Adriana had everything in front of her eyes. She had poisoned herself and spent the rest of the night in a room from Kirch in a basin. Frank offered to call a doctor, but she refused. It's a common thing in the South. I should just lie down. After all, there's a train tomorrow. Alex, I nursed her until dawn, brought her water, and just held her hand when she thought she was dying. I didn't have to go. If I'd sat next to you and told you stories, nothing would have happened. What kind of a sissy am I? Did I spoil your last night at sea? He gazed into her face with anxious eyes. It was all nothing, just to make you feel better. Sensing that Adriana had raised her head, Frank stood in the doorway and looked at them. How idyllic is this? Well, I won't intrude. And he closed the door. Adriana cried silently, ignoring him and trying to sleep. I'll sit quietly with you, Alex said. When they got home and life seemed to go on as usual, only Frank emphasized not talking about Alex. It was like he was noticing him less and less. Adriana tried to smooth things over. It was painful for her to lose her husband's good attitude, and she was terribly afraid that Frank would want to return the cause of their discord to the orphanage. She tried more carefully than ever to do her homework, asked her husband about his affairs, was constantly attentive to him, but she could not help admitting to herself that her heart was already given to the boy. When Alex went to school in the first school fall, he fell seriously ill. I was playing with the boys. They were pulling each other out of a puddle. The water was icy in November, and they didn't go home right away. Adriana only gasped when her son came in with a wet coat. It did not help, not a hot bath, not a fiery one, but hot tea with honey. The district doctor listened to the boy and gave 24 hours. If it does not get better by tomorrow, he should go to the hospital without talking. But that very evening, Alex got much worse. He began to choke, and Adriana called an ambulance. At the hospital where they were taken, it was still the old-fashioned way. Alex thought he was big and had to lie down without his mother. Adriana was literally on her knees, praying to keep her son. A paid room, anything. At least for the first while, until he was better, I wouldn't get away from him. After all, exhausted. The elderly doctor took pity on them and put both of them in a box, a small glass cage where the regular ones are. In the first few days after admission, mothers with infants were in the hospital. But Alex was really heavy. They put him on IVs. One by one, oxygen was given. And apparently, to take his mind off his suffering, he asked, "Tell a story." And it didn't occur to Adriana when she was going to the hospital to put a book in her bag. And then, in her haste to fulfill the boy's request, she told him about the magic rats. He was the first to hear the story from beginning to end. Of course, he was interested in the treasure that lurked from many years in a secret place. You never found out who lived there, who hid it all. Inexpensive. I had a feeling from the beginning that none of it was mine. I should give it to my mom, whatever she decides. And later, I didn't take an interest in it, but kept it. And the painted boy really looked like me. Like 2 drops of water, she said firmly. She gave it to me very tightly and whispered to me, "I love you." From then on, sometimes, when he was already discharged in the hours they stayed, Alone asked me to tell the story of the rats. Don't you get bored? No, it's true, nobody knows about it. Just the 2 of us, just us. Would you take a rat like that now? You see, nobody asked me. The one that came to me, that's what I took. It was fate, son. He had his hands around my neck. I got everything. I have you. I have love and happiness and wealth. Alex grew up. Daddy never had any children of his own. Losing hope of being a real father. As he talked, Frank convinced his wife to go back to work. You've fallen off the grid. You can't just live a life of domesticity. It's kind of shallow, isn't it? What are you going to remember in your old age, making borscht? You don't want me to sit on your neck, answering questions? What's that got to do with it? Adriana seemed to have completely forgotten what she had learned at school and university. Of course, if she had to remember everything, that wasn't what was important. Work would take up a huge part of her time, energy, and interests. She'd have to take that away from home. Alex, and something was happening to her. It was as if she was always afraid that something might happen to him. That fate would take him away from her. She was afraid for him, not for her husband. Frank spent less and less time at home with Adriana, though, and they no longer quarreled. She tried to please him, avoided asking him questions, and he was condescending and aloof. In high school, Alex became Adriana's second self. They understood each other half-heartedly, and she had no more reliable friend and assistant. Unbeknownst to anyone not at school, he learned to do all the men's work in a labor class, went to help Miranda, who in her old age began to see poorly, took care of her garden. He loved all that beauty. In the spring, he'd bring in boxes of live plants from the grocery store. Most gardeners already have them in season across the river. They won't take them there anyway. And Alex nursed these miraculous living practices. He had some life-giving hands, and the roses bloomed longer than others. And the berries were impossible to pick. I was kind of like a biologist. Adriana said to him with a chuckle to herself, "Maybe you should go into some kind of horticulture. You're clearly inclined, aren't you?" "I don't want to go away. It's a long way to study," she answered. And Adriana realized that he didn't want to leave her. Or maybe there was already a girl? Alex was handsome. It was not uncommon for girls to look at him. But Adriana didn't notice that her son was attracted to anyone. It was the separation from each other. They always took it hard. But Adriana didn't mind. She always knew when it came to Alex, she was a little crazy. And she wants to be in front of him all the time. But you can't do that. You have to fight it. And Alex, when he was once given to summer camp, came home on the 4th day. In the evening after lights out, he climbed out of the window and walked along the highway all night. "What have you done?" she aghast when the sun appeared on the doorstep. "I don't want to stay there. You have to do everything together. You have to be in front of me all the time." Walking in formation in the cafeteria, sitting all together, sleeping in a room. And the most important thing is that you don't have yourself there. Adriana looked at him with a sad smile. "But you have to become independent. I won't always be Radha. You're growing up. Independent, but not a cog in the machine. And I want to be there for you, as long as I can. If you asked me to, I'd come and get you. Now you and I are going to have to take the blame. I'll say I made the whole thing up and you didn't know. And I took it and left. First of all, that's the truth. And secondly, I'm not going to let you get scolded because of me." That's what Alex was all about. He was always trying to keep her out of trouble. But as time went on, the older the boy got, the more and more. An agonizing feeling grew on Adriana's soul. Although outwardly the family looked quite prosperous affluence, lack of quarrels, weekends, the three of them were often seen together. They spent time together, sometimes in nature, sometimes they went to the theater or to the premiere of a movie. At all this, Adriana realized that there was Frank, and there was herself together with Alex. Two families in essence, and there was no need for anyone but him. And she, in turn, was the center of his interests, the center of his soul. It was as if Adriana was holding on to the edge of a cliff, and the abyss beneath it was called madness. There was no way this was going to continue. At the same time, she knew she couldn't open up to anyone, not a psychiatrist or a priest in confession. Maybe only Miranda, who herself had made craziness and mistakes at every turn, and therefore no one to judge. When Alex was in the graduating class, there was a girl with him, with whom all the teachers had been tormented for long school years. She always did not find common language with her classmates, made a drama out of any trifle of his. Now because the teacher, in Nancy's opinion, gave her an unfair grade, the girl decided to jump out of the window from the 3rd floor. Almost 100%. It was staged. All Nancy wanted to do was open the frame, stand on the windowsill, promise to step down in front of the whole school, and for the teacher to apologize and never lower her grades again. Then Nancy would graciously agree to stay alive. But Alex didn't understand such nuances. He returned from the cafeteria before the others. He saw Natasha open the window, and in 2 jumps he was next to her and jerked her classmate to the ball. He didn't remember it himself. What did I grab her by? By her hair, it turned out. Nancy hit the back of her head painfully and replayed the play on the fly. She threw a tantrum, saying he'd jumped her and beaten her. Tossed a lump swelling on the back of her head. Half an hour later, Nancy's mother joined the scandal, saying she would write a police report to Alex, put her on the register, and so on and so forth without end. The teachers, who hadn't seen the case, tried to find some kind of compromise. They couldn't blame Alex, who had never been seen doing anything like that. And at the same time, they realized that the girl's mother could get the school in trouble. Adriana was not feeling well that day. She had been thinking since morning that she should probably go to the doctor and have them prescribe her pills for depression. And then she was called back to school. They didn't go home with Alex, and ours was immersed in itself, and Adriana didn't ask him any questions. She understood the need to talk, to explain that this is how life happens. The best intentions could be misunderstood, but that didn't mean that people in trouble should be abandoned to their fate. But Adriana didn't have the strength to have these conversations now. And only when Alex had already gone to bed, he called her. "Do you believe me?" he asked Adriana. He did not specify what she should believe him, but she understood and nodded. "I love you," he said before closing his eyes. She still sat by his bedside until he fell asleep. Alex was small. Realizing that he had finally fallen asleep, she bent over him lightly, touched her lips to his hair, and said in a slightly audible voice, "I love you too. It's just that we missed each other in time." Frank was already asleep too, and no one saw Adriana close the apartment door behind her. She was never found. The next week passed in a confusion of searching conversations with the police and with the investigator. There was no sign of her and no leads. The woman walked out of the house and melted away for sure. Frank could not believe what had happened. He assured him that Adriana would be found. Maybe she had a friend they didn't know about, and she was now holed up at her place. Maybe it happens. She just decided to run away somewhere for a while, bought tickets or stopped a hitchhiker. But she'll be back because she has no one else but them. Miranda had already completely lost her sight by that time, distinguishing only light and darkness. When the police asked about her daughter, Miranda shook her head. "She is not coming back." "How do you know that?" "She contacted you." The policeman slept like that out of sight. Miranda's sightless eyes reflected infinite sadness. She would never leave the boy. If she chose to leave, it would be for good. But she was alive. Miranda did not answer. Hardest of all, Adriana's disappearance had affected Alex. The preschool stories resolved themselves. The teachers spoke to Nancy and her mother in a different tone. The young man's grief had taken a toll on his mother. No one would do it at this time. But Alex no longer cared about all these vicissitudes. For him, the whole world collapsed. Once, when he was very young, his own mother left like that, and now Adriana disappeared without a trace. Did he hear her words, "We've just missed each other in time"? Or was it one of those dreams that, for the rest of his life, he was sure were the holy truth? About what happened to his mother, Alex eventually found out. But Adriana's fate remained unknown. For the first time and forever, Alex had a fight with his foster father, without acting grief-stricken. "I know you have another woman long ago, another family on the side." Frank was amazed. He did not make excuses and asked, "How did you know?" Alex grinned bitterly. "The first time I saw you was by chance in the city. You knew that Adriana hardly ever leaves the house. Didn't try too hard to hide her passy. And then it wasn't hard to guess all those clients who could only meet in the evening or on weekends. All those business calls when you went into the other room with the phone. She knew her too, meant wife. Not to me, she didn't. And if she did, it wasn't from me. I would never say anything to upset her. That was the whole point. The whole time you two were acting like two people in love, so there was no room for me. I couldn't interfere with your relationship. I was redundant 100 times. I wanted to take myself back to the orphanage. But I knew then Adriana would leave me and go with you." Alex turned pale. "And then you didn't care, did you? You just got yourself a new woman. A woman who loves me. And I couldn't leave Adriana. I felt she was going crazy, that any minute now she might have to go to the hospital. It wasn't because of me, it was because of you, son. I was full of venom because it's so small and she's so old." Adriana couldn't accept that. Alex raised his hand as if he wanted to slap his adoptive father. They stood against each other. Then the young man sat down and hid his face in his palms. Frank realized that he was crying. "I'm leaving," Alex said. "Thank God. Where to?" You think Adriana didn't want you to finish school, and you're about to start your exams. I finished school. I'm staying at Miranda's. She can't be alone right now. You're bringing your friend here, and you seem to have your own son. So you have a lot to compare your feelings for your own kid to someone else's. What's the advice? Love. Miranda took Alex in like he was meant to live here. This was Adriana's home. Now it's your home too, she said. Alex fell from zero and by heart at those words. Even his mother had talked about Adriana in the past. But living with Miranda seemed easy to him. She had retained her character even to old age. She took little to heart and was not afraid of anything, not even death. In the house, she learned to move by feel her very rarely crashed into something or something Ronaldo brewed coffee in an automatic coffee maker, generously added to a cup of brandy. She listened to music, sometimes quietly singing and dancing. On weekends, she often had friends over. And if you didn't look into the room, but listened to the laughter, the shouts of melody, you could think that a young company gathered there. Frank, whom Alex had never once called father. He did exactly as Alex had predicted. He brought in a young girl, Maria, who had long been his real wife and had borne him a son, Sam. He found what he was looking for. Maria worked in a company for his partner, sat in the office one smile, and I was worth 1 million. And himself did not understand why she agreed to date him, and then for years resigned herself to the role of mistress. I want the real thing. After all this surrogate, just the real 1 million men screaming saying the wife is sick, and that's why they can't file a divorce. I know you're not lying, and that you desperately want to leave a family that doesn't appreciate you, but you don't. Your dad is really sick, and you can't take care of her as a boy. But there will come a time when you'll be free, and then you'll be with me. And not because I'm young and pretty, but because you love me. I can see that. If I'm 1 in 1 billion, there's only 1 in 1 billion like you. That's what Maria meant. He thought as he picked out gifts for various holidays. He was happy to do crazy things for her, buy expensive rare things, and get something for Adriana and Alex. When Maria gave birth to Sam, Frank felt for the first time that life had found meaning. Sometimes they lay down and dreamed about how they would live, where they would go, what they would do. But there was no telling when it would all happen. Maria, with a smile, lowered him from heaven to earth. What exactly? When and how? But God will not punish us. It's not like we wish the war any harm. We just want it to go away on its own somehow, right? Maybe she'll fall in love and go off with someone else. He shook his head. She's already fallen in love, and it's incurable. Frank sobbed at the wake he had decided to hold for Adriana. She was still missing. He agonized, waiting for the denouement and wishing for some kind of closure. You can search for years, so we're looking for one woman. The musician left the house, went for a walk in the evening, told her mother that she would buy bread at the same time, and nobody has seen her since. If not found within the first few days of disappearance, get ready for it to take a long time. But Frank could wait no longer. He summoned acquaintances of distant loved ones, and in their presence cried Adriana as if dead. I'm sure she'll never be found again. Everything was leading up to it, and the state of mind lately tears, depressed with fat. In short, freak out, said a mutual acquaintance, who herself had views on Frank all her life did not work. So she went off the rails. Alex, of course, did not attend the wake. The next day, Frank brought home Maria and his son, and closed the door behind him, and locked the young woman in his arms. Freedom, freedom. Maria, we are finally free. Do you believe it? A few weeks later, they left for the sunny south. The trip they'd long dreamed of. Frank was right. His own son didn't bother him one bit. From time to time, once every few months, Frank called Alex, spoke in a polite, neutral voice, asked if everything was all right. If Alex needed anything, maybe some money to give. To all questions, the young man answered, "Thank you, I don't need anything." In these first and most difficult years, his grandmother became Alex's salvation. Sometimes they sat together near the fireplace, and Alex looked at the familiar features that had so much in common with his foster mother. Only with her. Miranda Alex had spoken to Adriana once. "You think she's dead?" he asked. "Then why haven't I ever seen you cry?" "Not even Frank. Why should I cry?" How long do I have left? We'll see each other soon anyway. At least in the other world. So you think he couldn't go on? Miranda put her hand on her chest, wore a few moments, definitely listening, then simply said, I know, and how. There was a harshness in Miranda's voice, in the way she herself had decided. She never brought up the subject again. But Alex still long went to the river, to the place where, as they said, they had found the body of his own mother. He looked at the water for hours and waited for some epiphany. But the secret never came out. He did well on his exams. He could have shown. But with Adriana gone, everything in his soul was extinguished. Average grades were enough. Instead of the army, he did alternative service. Couldn't leave Miranda and didn't care that he was a pacifist. There was no problem. The city hospital needed orderlies badly. He helped carry the sick and did all the dirty hard work that is so necessary, which young people are so often reluctant to take on, especially for next to nothing. But Miranda had enough money that they were not in need. And Alex knew himself. To the material side of life, he wasn't demanding to the point of outrage. Miranda gave him complete freedom and never talked about the choice of further life path or marriage. Sweet boy, you have your own head on your shoulders, and I'm too tired to take responsibility for someone else's life. She tried to serve herself to the last and asked surprisingly little to buy a bottle of her favorite cognac or bring a CD of this or that musician. And shortly before her death, she asked to take her to the sea and thinks that the old crust has finally lost its mind. Said Miranda, and red hair with the same movement as when she was young. I just want to say goodbye to my favorite corner. He became alarmed. You don't feel well. She looked at him over her glasses, which had long since been practically useless. If you're asking about the other side of the world, I'm off to a low start. But we'll get to the sea in time. It was one of the strangest trips of Alex's life. Miranda held him tightly under his arm and behaved in a way that people didn't immediately realize she could hardly see. They settled into a hotel simple and cheap on the beach itself, so that, sitting on the balcony, one could hear the noise of the sea. This accommodation had one disadvantage: the embankment under the windows. In the evening, from each cave carried its own music, smelled kebabs, fried corn, some spices. They were selling bottled beer, swings were flying up into the sky. Miranda sat on the balcony with a cigarette until dawn, a real extravaganza. That's what I wanted, she said. They came back. The summer ended. And in the fall, Miranda fell ill, and 2 days later she was gone. The writer's house, where she had lived most of her life, she bequeathed to some charitable foundation, and left Alex the apartment she had once bought for herself and her daughter. Alex worked in the emergency services. At one time, he thought about medical school. He had already seen a lot, but at the same time felt that he couldn't live 24 hours a day for the sick, like the few doctors he admired. He needed at least some time alone with himself, with his thoughts, with his soul. He worked shifts at the emergency ministry. There was no special romance. Most of the time they called him to open the doors of apartments locked by carelessness. Sometimes asked to take down from the tree favorite cat or cat. To rescue a favorite animal from trouble. In the heyday of overseas disease, ambulances were knocked down and often had to help transport heavy patients to the hospital. Sometimes worked in conjunction with firefighter divers. Maybe Alex went into this field because he hoped to learn something about Adriana. At least from someone's memories, maybe a broken thread would lead to where we are now. In his free time, Alex often wandered the streets. He was brought to those parts of the city where the yards resembled wells, and the houses were barely holding on from old age, and it was obvious that they were about to be demolished. Narrow streets, the smell of damp. He spoke to these houses to himself, of course, lest he be thought crazy. Touching the palm of his hand, the rough walls. Asked to himself if they had heard that about Adriana. Then the city decided to lay a new subway line. That's what they said. 6 dozen houses were going to be demolished because they couldn't withstand the underground tracks. The usual squabbles began, cynical on the one hand and desperately fruitless on the other. People who had lived in these houses for a century resisted moving, especially since they were always offered minimal money, just enough to buy a shabby house somewhere in the suburbs. Alex knew what would happen next. People would be evicted from their homes anyway. They would be demolished on the empty places. They would build elite buildings that would not be hindered by any subway and sell them for 3 times the price. Some people accepted it and left. Others said that they would not leave their homes until the last. Let them be bulldozed together with them. They were talking about stone buildings. Alex remembered that when they were going to demolish houses, wooden people showed similar intransigence. The dwellings were simply burned down. Who was doing it? No one knew. They never found the end of it. The houses were always burning at night. There were times when people couldn't escape in time. Once they saved a mother and her children. Some rare medicine for the youngest child was not pulled out of the fire. The other day, volunteers gave an announcement about collecting money in social networks to buy this drug. And now Alex has been called to one such house. There the grandmother disappeared, does not come, and in the room crying. The child explained on the phone an agitated woman. We already wanted to break the doors, but decided not to act ourselves. Let the professionals, so that we are not accused of anything bad later. You did absolutely right. The dispatcher responded. Opening a lock, old doors is not such a big job. And Alex didn't think he'd be here long. He'd never been down this street before. If Miranda were alive, she would have explained to him that this was the very house and the very communal apartment where he and Adriana used to live. A woman of about 42, in a shabby robe, met him in the entryway. The grandmother lives with us, the grandmother who came here. Honestly, I agree to move just to get rid of such a neighborhood of rats. She breeds them. Imagine, others are poisoned, but she breeds the whole house with her own hands, and they run away from her. Ew. Alex was already climbing the stairs, and we warned her that we will call the station, or as it is now called, the office, and all this contingent eliminate. So she put the critters in a bag today and went to the market. She says she's gonna give it away to people. Who's gonna get their hands on that filth? You know, every time she leaves the house, I hope in my heart that she won't come back. She's not an old woman, she's a witch. And then she's gone. And then we hear someone crying in the room. We start knocking, but there's only sobs. Then we called the Ministry of Emergency Situations. Alex answered in the words of the dispatcher. You did the right thing. That's what I think. And maybe when you open the door, we still call some service. Let them examine the room in your presence and take pictures. Impose some kind of fine on the grandmother for sanitary condition. We'll see there. This is the door. This is it. Alex noticed that he was surrounded by several women. They were curious neighbors. Apparently, the old lady didn't let them into her room, and they didn't know what was being done there behind the door. He took out his tools. It was quiet behind the door. It didn't take Alex more than a minute to open it. Perhaps the roommates immediately noticed the situation, like the rodent rats stirring on the back of the table. Perhaps Alex only saw the girl standing in the back of the room. 2 short pigtails, just below her shoulders, a museum dress. The way children were dressed long ago. Breasts. The girl was cradling a large gray rat that didn't seem to be trying to get away. The girl was the spitting image of Adriana, as he had seen her in pictures. The resemblance was so complete that he closed his eyes. Look, you're a child. Where did she get her from? The girl is your grandmother's own grandmother, yes. Remembered behind the neighbor's back. We were again separated in time. I wanted to say Alex and could not. Instead he asked, what's your rat's name? It's Love, said the girl. That's right.
Subscribe and click the bell.
There was a quiet knock in the night. Camille rushed fearfully to the window, squinted her nearsighted eyes, peering into the darkness, but could see nothing, and asked in a trembling voice, who's there? Open up, she heard outside. It's Michael Mansfield, cried the landlady, who recognized her husband's voice. You're back. She ran out onto the veranda, and a moment later let in her daughter and a man with sunken and tired eyes. It took Camille a good hard look to recognize her husband. She rushed toward him with unbridled joy, and he turned away and said, I'm dirty. We must wash, then we'll rejoice together. Now the water is warm on the stove. Maybe you should eat first. The woman glowed, casting her eyes on the long-awaited man. "I'll eat only a little. Don't feed me too much. I haven't had a crumb in my mouth for a week." Michael threw off his jacket, hung it on a hook by the door with the cloth of his hand. "Where have you been, Michael? It's been so long. At least you wrote, didn't you?" Camille asked with reproach in her voice. "I couldn't. I'll tell you everything afterwards. We didn't know what to think. My sister had already mourned you so many times as if you were dead. And I believed you were alive, so I went out. But all sorts of things crossed our minds. We thought maybe you'd been murdered or something. Good for you for not burying me before my time. And you didn't get married. How's Ethan sleeping?" "He's in town for work. He's got a good job now," his wife said with quiet joy. Michael sat down at the table, drank a cup of milk and bread, and said enough. "Camille, pour me some water and get the laundry ready. I can rub your back," the woman offered. "Don't," Michael replied categorically. His eyes seemed alien. "Go to bed. I'll sleep on the couch." "What is this?" Camille sighed heavily. "A bed. Nothing. The main thing is that I'm back to live again. Sleep." There was silence in the house. Camille lay in bed and closed her eyes. She remembered her younger years, hot meetings with her husband, when they both treated each other with tenderness. Why was he now so alien and indifferent? Is there nothing left of their love? Now he is a stranger around and not underfoot. What to do? How to live? What to say to him to make him realize that it is impossible for her to live without his love, tenderness, affection? At least say a nice word. "Christina, are you asleep?" Camille asked her sister. "I'm awake. Where do you think he's been all this time?" "I think he's been hiding. I think he's been hiding. I guess that's his fate. What's next?" "How should I know?" "Hurry up. I have to get up early tomorrow." "At least he hugged me, kissed me, said affectionate words, said sadly, 'I thought you were a woman.' Let him do what he wants. There's his son. We have a family. Maybe she'll come back to reason in time. She'll feel the man in her." The door creaked open. Michael came in, lay down on the couch, and after a few minutes his measured breathing was heard. Asleep. Lovingly thought Camille let him rest. He came back. We're all together at last. This is a great happiness. The next day, when the son Ethan learned that his father had returned, did not even talk to him, glumly gathered himself, and roughly whispered so that his mother did not hear. "Zekum do not intend to communicate. You can go wherever you want. If you stay, I'll go myself. I don't like being in a house with a criminal. Are you going to work?" the mother asked. "I'm on my way," replied the son. He looked angrily at his father and ran out the door. "He's grown up," said the father. Pain sparkled in his eyes. He took a deep breath and slumped his shoulders. "Growing up, thank God," Camille replied. "Where on earth have you been?" asked the wife. "On a job, on a construction site. And then it so happened that the owner refused to pay. Hired some thug to deal with us quietly with the laborers. I ran away at night, left everything behind, walked through the woods to get home. So I didn't write anything. Everything was left there quickly." Michael told a story he made up. It was a lie. He had served 5 years in the colony, sacrificing himself for his son. Now he escaped when exhausted by the heavy regime and beatings, pretended to be sick, won a place in the prison hospital, and from there he cheated. He made a daring escape. At night while the convoy dozed off. 5 years ago, he told the family to move to the country to his wife's sister Christina, explained himself vaguely. He sold his apartment in the city for debt. Work problems, and he needed to get away for a while. Did he actually pay whoever he needed to pay with the money from the apartment? Hired a lawyer to keep the family from knowing about the accident. That wasn't easy. Investigators insisted on questioning his wife and son. Even with money, Michael Mansfield barely managed to keep his family from being tortured by the investigation. He couldn't buy himself out of jail time, but he saved his wife and son from a terrible blow. For how long? No place to live. He came home like a beaten dog when he felt sorry for his family. And now what? Life in prison had turned Michael into a cruel, hard man. He already regretted that he didn't tell his wife everything at once and sacrificed his son. And all for what? Here's the son, now he turns his nose up. He didn't appreciate his father's deed. So what was it all for then? Turning away from his wife, Michael sat down at the table, put his hands on his head, and remembered the terrible day of the crime. The happy family life in town was marked by Ethan's 16th birthday. Michael fulfilled his son's wish by putting him behind the wheel of his old Niva. Ethan waived off enrollment in a driving school, promising his father not to take the car. And if he did drive it, then only together outside the city, where field roads are almost devoid of traffic. His son's passion for driving awakened with furious force. Against his wishes, his father enrolled Ethan in the best of the city's driving schools, but all for nothing. One day crossed all the family's aspirations and separated Michael from his family for years to come. The son took the car keys from his father's jacket late at night in Thane, sat behind the wheel, deciding to take an unauthorized ride through the city streets. At an intersection, a traffic light was stirring with a yellow light. A woman with a stroller was hurriedly stepping across the crosswalk. Ethan didn't even have time to slow down. He didn't look at the road for the running lights. Mommy realized too late that the approaching car was not going to brake forcefully and pushed the stroller away from herself. She herself was hit, fell on the hood. The car hit and flew off for a couple of meters in the ditch. The child in the stroller was orphaned in an instant, but the boy did not immediately realize what had happened. He was horrified when he heard a bang. Too late, when he saw the obstacle in the road. And then he just stepped on the gas. Other drivers immediately slowed down, jumped out of their cars before they could save the baby, got the license plate number of the perpetrator. The son drove home, put the car back where it was, didn't say anything to his father. Michael learned about the accident the next morning, when the son had already left for school and the wife to work. There was a knock on the door. Entered the investigator, a strict inspector and an investigator of the prosecutor's office. They introduced themselves as Michael. Your car was used in a hit-and-run collision with Citizen Smith. The victim died at the scene. You are detained on suspicion of murder and failure to render aid to the victim. How drunk Michael perceived what was going on. Got himself together, fumbled for his keys. The car was parked there on the hood with traces of the collision and bloodstains. All of this was an unthinkable, impossible event. A painful thought crossed out all existence before and after. Son. From then on, the investigation began. Quickly, however transformed. Witnesses were confused in their testimony. They said they couldn't see the driver's face in the headlights. One of them claimed it was a younger man behind the wheel. Taking the blame for his son, Michael got 10 years in a maximum security penal colony. His life in custody did not immediately go well. After learning about the crime, the man was beaten to a pulp on the first day. Long unbearable 5 years passed in a gloomy fog, which left dark misfires on the heart. After the final beating, Michael refused to get up. He was dragged to the hospital, left without much obstruction, thinking that the prisoner was already at death's door, and not today, so tomorrow he would give up. Having gained strength, having thoroughly studied the plan of the area, the man made an escape. He reached his family on foot, longing to live a little, to see his family and son. But it hurts in his chest to lie to his wife. He can't bear to tell her himself, or to wait for the police. Still, at least I get a little bit of freedom. My son doesn't need me. So now an honest man, a loving father, will have to bear the cross of imprisonment. At that time, his wife gave a voice to distract him from his bad thoughts. Poor you, Camille moaned. Maybe you should hide. I'm tired of hiding. Let it be what it will be. I will live as I can, calmly replied Michael. The quiet life didn't last long. 2 weeks later, 2 men in civilian clothes came for him. A police officer and an unfamiliar investigator from the city. Michael's eyes ran helplessly, as if looking for salvation. But there was nowhere to hide. Hello. Captain Justice Benjamin from the maternity ward. Well, tell us about yourself, hero. What is there to tell? You know everything. We know everything, but not everything. Who you really are is a fugitive criminal, Michael. Article 264. Camille gasped, till she woke up. She slumped to the floor and was as still as if she hadn't lived. Michael jumped up to his wife, screamed as loud as he could, yelling for an ambulance. He never got the chance that day. Michael was taken away to say goodbye to his wife, a fugitive. A new trial and a new sentence were looming. The man shouldered the salty jacket in which he had returned from his escape. He thought bitterly that he had run away for nothing. Now anyone could accuse his family of being related to a criminal. His son would get in trouble at work. Besides, Ethan didn't repent at all, as if he didn't bring trouble to the family. What kind of man has he raised? He had no remorse or conscience. It was bitter to realize that an unworthy man had grown up. What was going to happen that would change Ethan? It was hard to think about it, to accept the bleak canvas of hopelessness, glimpsed in the future of unbroken tunnels. Camille came to when Michael had already been taken away. She opened her eyes to see a white cloth of medical gowns in front of her. "Camille, get ready for the hospital," one of the attendants said insistently, in a high-pitched voice almost to you. "No, I don't need to. It's all right now. I'll leave on my own. I'm lying down. You're refusing hospitalization. And for nothing. Pressure attacks long ago you tired," insisted the doctor, wiping drops of sweat from her forehead. "There was nothing. It's from excitement. Grief in my family is barely audible," whispered the hostess, huffed, looking at the uninvited guests. "Sign here," slipped her a piece of paper, poking her finger into the edge and remembering the pen. Soon silence reigned in the house of sickness. Our hearts clenched, a buzzing in her head as if she hadn't slept. For days the world blurred with hopelessness. She wondered what she would say to her son when he returned. She felt sorry for both herself and Michael. Why such an incomprehensible and cruel fate? She dreamed so much to live near her husband, to take care of him, to create a family together. But here, they were next to each other, and happiness bypasses them. Some people and events constantly radiate them. Camille wiped her tears, went out into the yard, and looked around. A light fog rolled through the village. The morning was gloomy, as if the earth had frozen in a heavy, foreboding sense of something terrible. Camille walked along the road under an old lime tree. "When I live," I asked myself, "I'll die alone, without warmth or affection." Walk around the yard. Harsh Camille a little shook curly short hair and thought already more firmly, a little withdrawn from the first shock. "All misfortunes come to an end one day, and so will my misfortunes. If only Michael would bear it, explain himself, write me a letter." What really happened? She had little faith in his watchwork, even when he told her not to wait for him, to live her own life. How blind she'd been, not asking about her husband, not looking for him, as if in a fog. All those years she lived with her son first after his father disappeared. He shut down. He didn't say anything to his mother and left the house for long periods of time. 6 months later, silence. The son began to move away from his painful state, caused, as it seemed to the mother, by the fact that the father abandoned them. And then everything got better. In an instant, the boy came to life, enrolled in a technical school, became an engineer, and got a good place in the city. All this time, Ethan refused to speak or remember his father. Did he really know? The mother grievingly pondered over her son, determined to speak to him frankly when she arrived. But Ethan did not return that day, nor did he come home for the next week, until Camille herself went to see him at work in the city. Matusha turned softly. She to him, "I'm not going to say anything. I won't ask you anything. You'll share it with me as soon as you can, and come home. It's not the same without a man in the house. No one to help. My father's gone. It's not like I rented a place in town. It's easier for me. But if you need help at home, I'll come. But I don't want to deal with a family of criminals. If they find out at work, They'll kick me out. How can you? My mother exclaimed in amazement and shook her head reproachfully. Anything could have happened. Without knowing, how can you accuse a person? He may not be guilty of anything. It's just the way things are. In any case, stay. Does it hurt me that you've turned your back on your family? The son didn't say anything. Something subtly bitter flashed in his eyes. He rose abruptly and ran away from his mother. Camille sighed heavily and started on her way back. When she got back to the village, she walked along the path thoughtfully and did not notice where the police officer William suddenly appeared in front of her. He sat down on his motorcycle, looked down at Camille, and said, "You may not go down that road again. Soon everyone will know that you are the wife of a criminal. I'll tell the people all about you. Just think of the times we live in. Anything can happen. Ethan, we don't know if he's guilty yet. How could he not be guilty? He killed a young mother to death. Drunken beater almost ran over a baby. I checked with the investigator. Your husband left like that. Left a woman to die. Couldn't you have saved her? You better run." "Camille, I won't stand for it. 5 years a widower's been looking for your fucking family. To get rid of you. You're unlucky. The man's a tough one. He's gonna avenge his wife. He's gonna kill you or your little boy. William, did you know how to do that? What do you look like? Think about it. What's the use of rehashing the past? If Michael was guilty, now he's punished to the fullest." Bitter, Camille shouted, almost hysterically. Her body trembled with anger. Her heart pounded implacably. Having learned the terrible truth, the wife did not doubt her husband's innocence for a moment. He never drank. He drove carefully. He had never been in an accident in many years. All these thoughts ran through the poor woman's mind, but her eyes glittered furiously. "There's no redeeming what Michael did. One word from me, and you'll be gone. I didn't know what you were really like. You ran from your wife to me. And when I kicked you out, you became my enemy. Is that what revenge means? If you want to take revenge on me, then live in your house until you die for your sins. Don't say a word. Don't scare me with my sins. Think of your own. You won't be here much longer. Drive on by, smart ass. We'll see who outlives who." Camille proudly walked around and hurried to her house. But she realized from the last phrase, the policeman had said that she would be found soon. She had to leave. It was necessary to prepare, to collect everything necessary for herself and her son, which would come in handy on the long journey. Christina greeted her sister grudgingly. "So where are you? All the work is standing by." "What work, Christina? We're so grief-stricken. I'd better go to the Oscars." Camille shared the latest developments. They sat on a bench outside the house. They consoled each other as best they could and decided to go as far into the unknown as possible, on the condition that Christina stayed behind. It was worth it, Camille, but could Ethan be persuaded to go with them? Camille was even more worried about his fate now. Her gut told her that her son was involved in his father's business, but he was hiding it from his mother and would not share it. "To avoid getting in trouble with me, you can temporarily move in with your family. Christina Smith said we might get revenge, and he'll let us know where we live. Why are you listening to this blabbermouth? All he does is talk." "I'm a criminal's wife," Camille mumbled sadly. "And that says it all. Is it really true?" "I can't believe what I'm hearing," Christina asked. "We have to be ready for anything. You see, we're newcomers, even though we've been living here for a long time, not even registered. We could be evicted. I'm used to you. How can I be alone now? Maybe I'll ask my brother to stay with me for a while. I don't know. Why don't you go talk to him? That's my sister. Poor us," Christina exclaimed and hugged Camille. "No happiness for us." They sat and cried. I could feel the uncertainty, confusion and fear floating away with their tears. Camille got up from the bench first and quietly said, "Stop crying. We have to live. We have to work. You and I, Christina, will survive all our enemies. We've done them no harm. Camille and Ethan rode into the unknown. The son exercised until he feared retribution, determined to move for his own safety. And so the family left their settled home and farm. They traveled by freight car, having agreed with the driver so that their trail would be lost, cut off. They did not even take tickets. Camille found a seat near a high window, threw her things on the floor, comforted her son. "Don't be afraid of anything. People live everywhere. I don't mind. I'm even interested," Ethan answered, quietly rejoicing that he would no longer see his hated boss, would no longer go to work and perform routine tasks. "Where are we going?" "I don't know." "Son, you can look where there are shifts. You will find your specialty everywhere, and I can be a janitor, and we can come back. It'll be a while." Ethan kept watching the fields and forests outside the window. For the first time, he heard the names of stations and towns, and they kept driving forward as the towns and scenery changed. Having hastily looked through the list of vacancies, they even contacted the employer. They got the go-ahead, so they decided to find at the nearest station to change to Lazarev, where they promised work and lodging. On hitchhiking cars, we have already reached the village, where people lived in small houses. One of them was given to Camille Ethan. The boy frowned as he looked at the wilderness they had been forced into by fate. Nearby stretched a canal of green, undrinkable water. Along it grew steep trees, probably poplars. I was comforted by the fact that in this godforsaken settlement, there were workers from different parts of the country, friendly, helpful, and people ready to help the newcomers. These people willingly told a little about their lives, about how hard they managed to adapt. "This is where we are going to live," Camille said, looking around at the accommodation they had been given. "How long do we have to put up with this?" Ethan was indignant. He was ready to go back. But then he'd have to betray his mother. Our father's still got about 7 years left on his sentence. I got the address on my last date with him before he left. He wasn't much of a talker himself. Didn't even want to meet. 7 years, my son asked in surprise. His whole body shuddered, his face affirmed, as if it had become a fireplace. "So he and I are doing time together." "What are you saying, son? Maybe they'll release us sooner. Then we can come back sooner." Ethan was quickly put to work. The work was not dusty. They didn't ask for much. The pay was 5 times higher than his old job. The guy was excited and decided to earn money for an apartment, move closer to the sea, and then live in his own pleasure. Camille also started working. The woman did not refuse to do anything. She was used to hard work, but the move and the climate affected her health. One day she felt a pain in her neck, and when she felt a small band, which grew 3 days later. A fever rose. Camille was frightened. What if something happened to her? How would her son be left alone? Who would look after him and care for him? A local doctor was called in. A man with a pleasant face and a soft voice, not yet old black hair, came in and examined the patient and said that it was carbonic anemia, most likely caused by the change of climate. He applied some ointment either for it or for simple human attention. Camille felt better. She almost cried. For the first time she felt cared for. This handsome, manly man had stirred her hitherto dormant heart. "Here's the thing. Camille, don't worry," said the doctor. "I'll cure you of this ailment. I've had to deal with other illnesses, and I'll make sure you don't do any more hard work. What am I supposed to do? You're gonna clean my office. I'll get you a job as a nurse. It's not much, but it's still a good salary. Thank you very much, Liam. Feel better. I'll come back tomorrow to check on you." The doctor visited Camille for a week, until the tumor finally went away. "I'll give you 3 more days to recover, and you'll start your new job on Monday. You and I will have plenty. Thank you, Liam. You brought me back from the dead." "You're welcome. It's my duty. I met your son. He's a wonderful boy, well-mannered. I think we'll be friends. He's different. Sometimes, you see, he grows up without a father." "Where's the father sitting?" He lowered his eyes in shame. "Camille," and then she added, "I've written to him, But we haven't heard from him. I hope he's alive. What's he in for? The doctor asked. Then he realized, it's none of my business. Camille sighed softly and said, poor people suffer for no reason. It's not his fault, but he's hiding something. He took it all on himself. In these moments, she was still pushing away from herself the terrible thoughts concerning the truth of that hit and run. But in her mind, there were still images of insight, of the true state of affairs. I look forward to seeing you at work, Liam went out. And Camille thought happily that the world was not without good people, but that they would get by in the middle of nowhere. The time would come, they'd come home, even if they had to live here for a few years. The woman remembered her garden, orphaned and home, and cried quietly with longing and sadness. Camille went to work until lunchtime washing. She cleaned the floors of Dr. Silverstav's office, and then in the evening, she washed medical dishes. Sterilize it one day on New Year's Eve. The doctor was late at work, sat writing at his desk and prevented Camille, who was in a hurry to get home, because she wanted to celebrate the holiday with her son and cook him something tasty for dinner. What is it, Liam, that you've earned so much? All the people are getting ready to celebrate, and you haven't gotten off work. It's nice to be with you, Camille. I don't want to go home. Let's celebrate New Year's Eve together. The man suddenly proposed and looked intently into the eyes of the former woman. I have some wine here. I have some candy, and a melon I bought at the market when I went downtown. The doctor took a bottle of wine out of the cupboard and invited Camille. Put your rags aside. Sit down at the table. The woman wiped her hands while stroking her curly hair and quietly sat down to the table. The man kept looking at the guest with tenderness. Filled a glass with wine. Put it down. Let's drink to the new year, my dear. May it bring us happiness, good health, and all the best in our lives. May it be so. Bless you, Liam. I answered. Raised the glasses. We clinked glasses. You're just a heroic woman. Suddenly, a man confessed. And very beautiful. What are you saying? I'm the wife of a criminal. Such a stigma, which will not be washed away for the rest of my life. The woman said sadly, sighing bitterly, Good hostess, I can see that everything burns in your hands. I liked you from the first time I met you. The time for confessions had begun. Camille knew it would be soon. She could barely keep her heart from going into her chest. I don't even know how to thank you for everything, Camille said. You don't have to do anything. People should help each other. I've been wanting to talk to you about an important topic for a long time. I don't know how to begin. The woman looked boldly at the doctor and said with a sincere smile, Finish, don't be shy. I am a simple woman, I will understand everything. The doctor was silent. Then he took out of his pocket a pack of MP smoked, hiding his eyes behind a cloud of smoke, and quietly said to us, Camille, You'll have to live here for a long time. My wife divorced me and left, and your husband is nowhere to be found. I would be happy if we could be together and walk side by side through life. Camille sighed, and her face blushed. She tousled her unruly hair and said in a trembling voice, Liam, darling, anything but that. I'll never cheat on my husband as long as he's alive, and he is. I will wait for him always. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's my bitter truth. He's the only one I love. All right, that's enough. I understand, said the doctor sorrowfully. Camille jumped out from behind the desk, threw her coat over her shoulders. The man didn't let her go so easily. He jumped up next, tugged her hand, and nestled it against his lips. And the women? A voluptuous wave, like a poison, swept over her passion, to plunge headlong into the tenderness this handsome and determined man was showing her. The woman wanted to give up, but managed to overcome her feelings. I'll go, I'm sorry. Wait, take a melon. Give it to your son as a gift from me. The doctor did not look at it, studied the gift, and turned away with annoyance. I apologize if anything is wrong. Happy New Year. The doctor bent down again to kiss Camille, but she jumped out of the door, frightened. She liked the man very much, and her soul was drawn to him. But Ethan was waiting at home, complaining daily about the lack of life in this hell. Camille stepped off the porch, saw the black sky above her, rare stars, but hurried home. Her son met her grudgingly. "What took you so long today?" "It's the end of the year. I had to clean up properly. I've prepared the table. Come on, let's celebrate." "The doctor gave you a melon. Where did he get it in the middle of winter?" "Is there such a thing?" Ethan smelled the melon with pleasure. "How was the party at work?" "It was fun," his mother asked, remembering that the workers wanted to have a corporate party. "What kind of fun?" "No girls, hardly any. The workers jumped to the balalaika. That's all. But now, it'll be the weekend. You'll have a rest," Camille said, thinking about Seliverstova, how she would now work with him, and how to behave in general to pretend that nothing had happened. A day later she came to work, noticed that the doctor sadly meets her gaze. "I feel awkward. I'll have to change jobs," Camille thought. "I'm so used to it. I'll have to do something about this place. It would be nice to get out of here altogether." The days were quiet but dreary. Liam pestered Camille, not letting her breathe. The woman felt she would give up just a little more. But a month later she received a letter from Michael. He said he was working at the mine, but he'd fallen ill. He is now undergoing treatment. The letter was short but warm. Michael was waiting to meet his wife. Said he loved the man, never broken by prison. The event stirred. It gave Camille the strength to wait for Michael's return. But she had to move now so her paths would never cross again. The neighborhood center found her a job bagging cotton. She rented an apartment. There was room for Ethan, who had moved to a higher position. A new life began for the boy. He liked it better in the center, as there were no entertainment in the village, and here there was civilization. Cinemas, swimming pool, gym, and other joys of the modern world. The boy made a lot of friends. He was rarely at home. At that time, his father pulled the burden of prison life instead of his son. Work in the mine, where Michael was imprisoned, was hard and dangerous. With poor nutrition took a lot of energy. The man tried not to think about the fact that he would have to live like that for another 7 years, for which he was sentenced. From time to time there were accidents, flooding, methane explosions, and people died in the mines. No one tried to save the prisoners. The only lucky thing was that there were freelancers working nearby who treated people with understanding and humanity, even though they knew they were criminals. The workers shared bread and hot tea from thermoses. Michael bitterly realized the wrongness of this life. The native son never repented. Moreover, he cut his father out of his life, while strangers showed him sympathy. What was there to live for? The strength was leaving the man, who was losing interest in his existence. Sometimes the man returned with thoughts to this world to cheer himself up. He thought that it was not by chance that he had been given this trial. Diseases did not take him for a long time. However, the daily breathing of coal dust for 2 years still had a bad effect on his health. Michael developed a dark spot on his lungs. The disease began with a strong cough and high fever, so he was put in the hospital. While they examined and treated him, Michael, in his spare time, took up the notes he had been writing in his head for a long time. However, they were just diary notes. He wanted his manuscript to live on, and his son read these notes and understood everything. In the ward where Michael was assigned, there were other patients who distracted him with complimentary conversations. Someone tugged on the man's shoulder. He flinched in surprise, turned his head, saw the faded eyes of one of the TB patients. "Let's go play cards, clerk." "I can't. I don't feel well." Another time waved away Michael, dissatisfied that interrupted his musings. "What are you writing?" "It's calling." "But write. We won't be here long," replied the coughing patient. "Why are you throwing your germs around?" The man was indignant. At the voice, a nurse came running in to stop the outburst. Everyone is having a hard time as it is. Setting aside her paycheck, Camille collected help and sent the money to her husband for treatment. Thanks to the help, he bought himself a warm place in the office. He was able to transfer to a lighter job in a building instead of a mine. From time to time, he carried gifts to the doctors, and they put him in the hospital and treated him as best they could with the medicine they had on hand. Had there ever been sick people in Hippol's ward and pause? Michael gazed up at the starry sky through the thick glass on which droplets of moisture crawled. The realization of his son's meanness once again weighed heavily on his soul. The man leaned back tiredly on the pillow. He felt that it became difficult to breathe. His heart ached. He lay for a few minutes, waiting for relief. The pain in his heart was growing. He thought that he should ask the nurse for some valerian, though he was still afraid that they would not give him some poison. However, he got up and quietly, so as not to wake up any of the patients, went out into the corridor, where there was more clean air. After 3 years, Michael was released. He immediately decided to go to his wife and son, whom he had not seen for almost 10 years. The long road stretched in time for almost a week, and the desire seemed to be the meeting. He decided to forget forever what he had to endure in prison. He rode in silence, glancing sternly at his fellow travelers. No one wanted to tell about his sufferings. I believe that they had faded into oblivion. Fear, camp, death. People in detention died of hunger. Cold was forced to endure suffering, humiliation, abuse. The pain he experienced had to be thrown out of his memory and soul. Otherwise, as he realized, it would be impossible to live further with an exorbitant resentment against himself, his relatives, and friends. Forget. The wheels of the train were knocking when the boundless steps spread out behind the car window more than once and warmly. Michael joyfully thought that soon he would see his relatives, and it would be his reward for long suffering and patience. He believed that his son had not only grown up, but also strengthened his soul. That means that he would accept his father and repent of his deed. The small town where Camille and Ethan lived was not far from the station. I drove to it. Michael easily found the right street and house from the address. He knocked on the door. A tall, bearded man with clear eyes opened the door. Am I in the right place? His father didn't recognize this man as his son. I'm looking for Camille. Does she live here? It's my mother, the man said, confused and resentful. So you, Ethan, are my son? The guest exclaimed in surprise, looking into the stranger's face. I am Ethan. So you are, father. But you don't come to me with nonsense. I don't want no prisoner for a father, and don't you dare say anything to your mother. I'll pretend for her sake that I'm glad you're back. You should be flogged. Parasites, such ungrateful in his heart. His father suddenly hissed. His eyebrows moved menacingly and glanced from Papeliev, about to give his great-aged son a thrashing. But he didn't have time. Footsteps were heard. A woman with a tired face came out to the noise. She said hello, looking intently into the face of her guest. So did he. And suddenly, Michael, through the fine wrinkles and shadows loomed the forgotten face of Camille. The man rushed toward her, stepped forward. She recognized him at last, and with a surprised cry, Michael returned. She fell against his chest. He put his arms around her and stroked her head. Camille shuddered. Stop it. Why are you crying? It's all right, her husband said. You're breathing so hard. What's wrong with your lungs? Concerned, she asked. It's a legacy from working in the mine. But I have not had tuberculosis. Don't worry, it's not contagious. How did you get there? Why didn't you write? We would have met you. I wasn't at the resort. Camille didn't stay there with me. As soon as they let me out, I ran to you. I felt like it would never end either. I didn't want to die there, and it was unbearable to live. Camille looked into her husband's face and said, Thank God we're together. I feel like you've been through a lot too, but you did a good job raising such a son. I didn't recognize him. I thought I'd made a mistake. Wrong place. Michael hugged his family. The son still held himself apart only for his mother's sake, and he did. But in Ethan's chest had long been pushing, drowning out my sense of conscience. He was ashamed of his criminal father, but he could not forget the day when he committed the crime. He was the one who was supposed to do the time. And then his father stepped in. Nobody asked him to be a hero. The son would have gotten away with it, run, but he wouldn't have done time. Why did the father get so excited? He took such a burden on himself. He should bear the cross himself. And he just lived, suffered in a foreign land with his mother. All because of his criminal father. The son couldn't stand it any longer and left the yard. Michael and Camille sat on a bench and sat for a long time remembering something from that long ago past, when the son was still very young and did not remember much. It was good and light for them to sit together and feel that there was something very important in this life that united them, despite any obstacles. After they entered a pleasant dwelling, well furnished, clean and clean, plenty of food. The furniture is new. Sit closer to the table. Maybe you want to eat. The wife fussed with care. I don't want to eat, but I'd like some water. With love and gratitude, replied the man, still not believing in his return to the fact that the hard years were behind him. Tell me, how did you live here? Yes, everything is fine. We work slowly. Camille went to work every day. My son was in the service too. He hardly ever came home. A terrible secret. It was weighing him down. The father irritated with his frightening appearance of a man who had been sitting for many years. For the first time in many years, Michael had enough free time to finally put his notes in order. After painstaking labor, sent the manuscripts to the editor. His only copy, without letting his son read the story. From the editorial office came a polite reply thanking him for his labor and asking him to wait a little longer. With the release of the book, Michael realized that no one took his work seriously. Dreams that he could become a recognizable writer crumbled. It was replaced by a bitter realization. No one wants it yet. Great disappointment gripped his soul. Michael lamented his fate and became angry with his son, became silent and irritable. Over time, his health deteriorated. The man went to bed outside in the open air. It was hard for him to breathe. His heart was pounding, almost flying out of his chest. The doctors said the climate wasn't suitable. However, the family had no intention of staying here any longer. Ethan's contract could be terminated at any time. As soon as the son finished the third term of the contract, they decided to return to their native village. True, Camille did not immediately agree, as I imagined that Midrozhkn and his nasty daughter Maria, who gave us no life. I don't want to think about Karachevo. She spoke anxiously. Let's stay in the Far East, such a beautiful city. Not Camille. My health is weak. I want to die. I'm at home among strangers. I want to retire to my native land. Objected Michael. You will live without thinking of death, asked the wife. I've been wanting to go back for a long time, said the son. When did you come to an agreement? Camille was surprised. The first day you came back. It was clear right away. I don't belong here. Again, Camille was on the road, buying and selling things. Michael was packing and getting the luggage ready to go. Ethan was gone all day. Somewhere on the street, he was saying goodbye to his friends in the service. A girl Ethan was friends with wanted to study to be an actress, dreamed of going to Moscow. She called him to come with her. The man was still ashamed of his father's dark past. The truth about him and his family might come out. It would be embarrassing. Let's do this, he told the girl. If you go to school, I will come to you in Moscow, find a job, and help you in any way I can. If you don't get in, you will come to me in Karachi, and there together we will decide how to live on. It's a deal. The girl agreed easily and put her hot arms around Ogai's neck. A week later, she came to see Ethan off at the train station. In the presence of his parents, the guy felt constrained. He only stared intently at the girl, trying to remember her as beautiful as she was now. When his mother called, he retreated a few steps, stopped, waved, and jumped into the car. Then how long was the ride? No matter what Ethan did looking out the window or lying down with his eyes closed, he saw only a girl with blonde straight hair in front of him because of the separation from his beloved. The meeting with his native village was not as joyful as he had dreamed and imagined. The old station building looked the same as before. The same tall trees welcomed green branches under the hot wind. Sparrows flew down in flocks and landed on the platform. To the returning family, it seemed as if they were back in the old days, and when they looked, they noticed that they didn't see a single familiar face. Michael went to the station square, saw a young cab driver, asked him how much he would charge. He replied that the ride was not expensive. They drove in silence, looking at the surroundings, and did not recognize the former places. New trees had grown, disappeared, and the fields were overgrown with weeds. The cab driver tried to speak, asked who they were, where were they from. Michael evasively explained that they were traveling for work. But, as they say, well, only where we are not. That's why they come back to their homeland. Now many people are looking for easy money. They go far away. The guy answered. That was the end of the speech of the car about the body by blood. Turning onto a field road, which quickly led to a small forest, opened Shorter Cow. Michael, with excitement, immediately noticed 3 new buildings nearby. He easily recognized the other houses, mentioned the owners, looked into the yards where someone's children and grandchildren were huddled. Life went on as usual. Maybe only now the man realized the tragic nature of human life. At the end of the village, they asked the cab driver to stop, thanked him, and walked to their house. They looked closely at the trees, sighed at the native odors. They wanted to see their farm as soon as possible. How come? The house is long gone. All that's left is daycare. Bitter, Camille exclaimed. The family stopped at the yard, which was nothing but a pile of stone. Ethan struggled to keep from snapping and yelling at his parents. He wanted to go to the city as soon as possible, rent an apartment, and live a normal life, without shame or fear of anyone. Everything's gone. What kind of people? Angrily, Camille said. Did you think you had a palace waiting for you here? Overcast, smiled Michael. At least they left the stove. Everyone needs a stove. How can you be so calm? I'm happy to be alive and free. Will we build a new house? Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to them. I see the criminals have returned to them. William came. Well, you tore down the house, and now you've come to rejoice in our misfortune. I'm on the offensive. Camille, you're wrong to attack me. People thought you were gone for good, so they took everything of value. William started making excuses. There's nothing to be sorry about. Your old house was worthless, and then that little man came along whose wife your father had killed. Ethan shuddered and turned away. So he and his men used it for firewood. Buy a log, and I'll help you build a new house. Wow. Camille dismissively threw the figure of the aged district officer and asked, why are you from the bosses to the builders? I've been in simple ones for a long time. Young, literate people came to replace us, and we have done our time, served the fatherland. How is your family? Michael asked. No, I've already buried my wife. She was in the hospital for a month, and then the doctors said to take her away. Let her stay at home. They prescribed some pills, and she drank them, and one day she didn't wake up. Easy death. In the coffin, she was lying so beautiful, so calm. I couldn't even believe she wasn't alive. Left alone with his daughter. Smith stepped with his nose. People are leaving. Michael said quietly. Where are we going to put the new house? Camille asked. We'll put it here, said the man. Maybe we shouldn't. This place is unhappy from the beginning. The wife hesitated. We made him happy. Orphaned, the family stopped, looked back at the ruined yard, and each of them imagined the future house in his own way. But for some reason, they each saw the one that had stood here before, so familiar and native. Only their Ethan wrinkled his nose. Everyone wanted to get to the city, away from their parents. Michael looked into the well. Glimpses of oxen, water black as oil. Our well is blocked. With a grudge, he said, we'll clean it up. Camille replied calmly. The Mansfields moved toward their brother's house. He was sitting on a bench, interested, watching the people who were approaching him and did not recognize him at once. Only when Camille said hello. The brother got up joyfully and began to hug and kiss his relatives. "Look at me, Camille. I have become so faded in voice," he said, and tears kept running from his eyes. "It's disgusting to look at myself in the mirror. What's the matter?" "As long as your soul is young," my sister said. "I'm not young either. Over the years, my husband didn't even recognize me right away. You're here for good. There's no home. You'll live here for now. Let's go inside. I'll buy you something God sent." The guests had just sat down to eat. An excited Christina came running in, hugging her sister, crying and laughing, wiping her tears and saying, "You're back. How many nights have I not slept? How long have I thought about you? Enough. That's enough. Calm down." Camille stopped her with a smile. Christina stepped back and turned to her nephew. "My God, who is that man?" "Ethan, is that you?" "Me? Who else?" Barefoot replied the boy. That's how the cavalier grew up. There was no limit to the peasant's joy. She immediately began to tell about the village news. After a little while, a message came from the girl Ethan that she had entered the theater institute. But Ethan never went to see her in Moscow. Instead, he took a new job in the city at a security agency, settled in a hostel in the service. He wanted to save money for a trouble-free life in the capital. Now the money he had saved up was not even enough to buy an apartment. The boy quickly learned a new profession, and he even liked it. After all, he dreamed, like every boy, to protect from trouble, guard, and even save people. In the first few months, he wrote the name Anna on his shoulder, then immortalized his beloved, who was always with him now. Soon the guy was promoted, appointing him deputy head of the security service. Soon the unexpected happened. Anna sent a long message thanking him for his understanding and longtime friendship, but informing him that she had met a great and true love. She wrote that she had married a good man and was happy that she could. Unites not only love, but also a common cause. Plus bragged that she had already been invited to a movie shoot. Ethan read the message and realized that he had lost it forever. Life had lost its meaning. A new blow struck the unhappy man like a punishment from heaven. A sin committed in advance. What was he to labor for now? Work? No life. Ahead instead of the future is darkness, where there is no love and never will be, and no pity for his father. What kind of monster is he? Because of him, his own man spent more than 10 years in prison. He sacrificed himself. And who is he? He's nothing. For 24 hours, Ethan lay on his bed facing the wall, clenching his teeth to keep from screaming with hatred and powerlessness. At night he tried to sleep, but the voices in his subconscious woke him up and kept him awake. Daddy's daddy ran him over. In the morning, the boss called, ordered to report to work in a severe psychological disorder. The man entered the office to the management, sat down with his head down on the table, and go to work. "Hear you what the resort ordered." "I cannot," replied Ethan. "What can be sick, so go to the hospital." "My soul hurts," quietly answered the guy. From grief, he lost his strength and could not move. In fact, it turned out that it was better to die. They keep the mentally ill in the nut house. Go to work. The boss jumped up to your subordinate and slapped him on the cheek. Ethan suddenly looked into the eyes of his interlocutor with hatred, suddenly jumped up from his chair, grabbed a clerical knife from the table. Polos kicked himself in the stomach. Blood in a narrow strip marked the wound and began to drip to the floor. The boss turned pale and screamed in a frenzy. Ethan slumped helplessly to the floor and closed his eyes. He felt neither pain nor fear, and a moment later he lost consciousness and did not hear how he was carried on a stretcher to the car, how the surgery was done, how he was placed in the intensive care unit. He woke up in the evening, saw a man in a white coat above him, and asked, "Why am I here?" "Did you have surgery?" The doctor answered. "Surgery?" Ethan asked again. "And only now I remember everything. How do you feel? What hurts?" "Nothing." "What about me?" "Cut my skin. Did a little damage to my intestines, but thank God I was hungry this morning. So there were no complications. It could have been really bad. Think about it. What do you value more than your own life, or some unpleasantness that threw you off balance? I will. Only I can't beg for your forgiveness now. I'm a worthless man. I don't deserve to live. Just lie still for now. I've got 12 stitches. Make sure they don't come apart, or we'll have to sew them up again. Just don't tell your relatives. The man asked. The doctor left. Ethan tried to turn on his side and felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He tried to feel his stomach. It appeared to be all renamed. Again, the resentment against himself came from far away. Thoughts of Anna shifted somewhere in the background. He shoved it away. He raised his hand to nail his hair. The movement echoed with pain. He regretted now that he had been so intemperate and had almost destroyed himself because of some woman and a foolish impulse. His father had given half his life for him, and he'd almost wiped out those efforts in one fell swoop. He had no right. He's the only one his parents have. How could they be without him? The thought of his family finally touched the callus, as it had seemed to the boy before. He brushed away the tears sternly and firmly decided to live near his mother and father, to help them at the construction site as long as they were alive, as long as it was possible to please them with their presence. 4 days later, Ethan was transferred to a ward, and after a couple of weeks he was discharged. He suddenly returned to Karachevo. On the threshold he stood with his head down and tried his strength. Batya, let's go. We need to talk. Michael looked sternly at his son, realizing in advance that the latter had realized everything. Father, I'm sorry. I don't know when you'll be able to forgive me. I have no right to forgive you. Your forgiveness will be yours, son. It's all behind us now. If we can't change anything, there's no point in rehashing the past. Thank you, Dad. I didn't deserve that sacrifice. Things will be different now. His father turned away, a man's tear running down his cheek. Behind him, pain, beatings, a dark past in custody, all for the sake of his favorite son. But the boy lived freely. That's the main thing. First thing the mom noticed was the tattoo. She got really worried. Why would he do that to that girl? What's he gonna do to himself for her? Michael's reaction to that was very restrained. Who cares about us? The husband replied calmly. You'd better ask why the son came back from the city early. Why the son? Ethan smiled strangely and replied cheerfully, I'm fed up with everything there. I want to take care of my parents. Everything I've saved up. Let's spend it on a new house, a 2-story one. Camille was suspicious and asked insistently if you were joking, son. Did something happen? Nothing happened. I had an operation. You can't work after that. What surgery? Worried? Asked Michael. And I know they cut something out there. Show me, the mother said. Ethan, sighing, pulled up his shirt and showed the red scar on his stomach. The parents stared at Ethan stunned. Oh, my little son, cried the mother. They gave me anesthesia. Nothing hurt me. Look, how much can you eat? I'm hungry, or are you going to starve me? The kid's sick for fun. I'll be right back, answered the mother and fussed at the stove. They smelled familiar dishes. Ethan felt happy and free for the first time in a long time. The weight of guilt had been pinning the lice to the ground for almost 15 years. Slowly it dissolved. We can start a new life. In the evening, women's voices were heard outside the window. Some were singing, laughing. Camille pulled back the curtain, looked outside, but saw nothing. The girls were already sniffing. That a beau has appeared in the village, muttered the mother. Now I'll go and disperse everyone, not travelers. Angrily, she said, hide him under your skirt. The kid's too old, noted Michael. Ethan, meanwhile, without a word about the family, slipped out the door. He returned in the morning. Camille was beginning to resent him for sneaking around and keeping her parents up all night. The husband stopped it. Let the boy live. He's not a little boy anymore. Ethan smiled warmly. His father sipped his milk, climbed onto the couch, and a moment later his steady breathing was heard. Camille was working in the yard and thinking about her son. It would be good for him to continue working in a new place. They could take care of the house. Maybe they should go to the apartment, but the thought of living within four walls now dragged the woman. She got used to life in the village and did not want to return to the city. But she did not want her son to be pulled into the hard village life. What was the point of working without a salary? To live on the farm when you have a profession. Michael soon got a job as a watchman. Camille, too, was thinking of going to work the way one should go to build one's house. The son, too, was looking for work in town, especially since it's only about 15 kilometers away. If he got a good position, he could buy an apartment. It was time to start a family. Now, Camille dreamed of waiting for grandchildren. She didn't rush her son to take over. She wanted him to rest, to gain strength. How much hard work had he endured? Busy with her thoughts, she did not notice Christina entering the courtyard. She sat on a bench, put her hands on her hem and said, "You work hard, and you don't know what your son is doing." "Why?" Surprise raised his eyes. Camille glared at William and met "That's what." "How do you know?" "The whole village is buzzing. Sophia is bragging that Ethan has promised to marry her. And that's all the unhappiness we need." The mother clapped her hands together and looked anxiously toward the palace, where father and son were sawing wood. "I'll show him, Sophia. Anything you don't pile on the lad unawares," stopped Camille Christina, knowing how hot she was to talk to him quietly, affectionately, in a motherly way. "Explain what's going on. Tell me how you've been leaning in for over 10 years. I'll give that girl a drink if she doesn't give up on the guys," shouted Camille, who couldn't contain her anger. Maybe on purpose so her son could hear. "You're so stubborn. No matter what you're told, you do it your way." Michael spotted his sister in the yard, left work, came over, said hello, asked her how she was doing. "You know how to live. Don't have your own house. Don't get upset." "Sister, I'll build a house. I'll take you in while you build a house." "It's like that," said Christina. Ethan was chopping wood. Camille looked in his direction and said, "Michael, hear what our son has done. Sophia Sam has been visiting. Christina says that the whole village knows about it." "When did he have time?" the husband said calmly. "It's gossip. Ask him yourself." "All right, I'll ask him," Michael agreed. Christina adjusted the handkerchief on her head. "It's hard." "Oh," got up from the bench. "But I'll go. I'll take care of it myself," she said. Camille invited Camille to join us. "Thank you. I'll go. I'm walking slowly now, until I get home. That's how I'm going to have dinner." How sly. Camille thought of Christina. Doesn't want to mess things up with her nephew. Everyone wants to be nice, but Sophia's a viper too. Michael can't be lured. She wants his son so badly. It won't work. The gate slammed behind Christina. "What do you want?" "Like a mouse on grits," Michael asked, thinking about what to do. "Do nothing. Or is he stupid to get married so soon?" "Not into you. He's a success. Maybe because I raised him myself. He only looks like you. He didn't have a father around. Who should I look up to? I'd like to talk to him now, because I've lost it. I hate that girl, you know." After lunch, Michael deliberately waited until Camille went inside and started talking to his son. "What are you going to do next?" "I'm going to look for a job. I think I might stay here." "We're here." Surprised father. "It's almost free to go to work and have nothing from it. That's how people live. Only idlers live like that. Maybe you've already decided to get married." Ethan smiled and answered, "I think I'll have to get married at some point." "Is it really with her?" "Why?" "She's a pretty girl," the son said, happy to hear what he hadn't dared to tell his parents yet. "You know how many such pretty there are in the world, 1000000, and you need to choose one, which you will love all your life unsatisfied," said the father. "I'll get married." "I'll have one. Why put a clamp around your neck so early? You still have your whole life ahead of you." At that time, Camille entered the house and said indignantly, "Don't you remember, Ethan, how we were almost killed because of Verka's father. Children are not responsible for their parents, Ethan objected. What's the matter with you two? Sophia wanted us dead too. Are you ready to warm a snake on your chest? Camille shouted in a huff. Ethan looked at his mother's face in confusion. He rushed to the door, grabbed his jacket, and sprinted out of the house. Just as mad and stubborn as you said, watching out the window for his son Michael. Where did he run to? Camille asked anxiously. Don't worry, he won't go drowning. Like you did when you were young. What have I done? When will he come back? I'll go crazy if he's gone for a long time. Calm down. Let the boy think about what we told him. It might be good for him. The husband comforted his wife. What's going on in there? Asked the brother who entered the yard. Nothing a little. She yelled at her son. Did he take offense? Replied Michael. Ethan returned to his parents. 2 days later said he got a job as an engineer in a construction organization in the city. He was temporarily living in a hostel. Camille was overjoyed. She asked what you, my son, will do there. I'll be a senior wherever they send me. I have to justify my profession. My father was happy. The main thing is that they gave you dormitories. I'll help you build a house. I'll buy the apartment myself. The son looked at his watch and warned. I've come to get my things. Camille calmly thought that he would probably give up Verka if he suddenly changed his plans so abruptly. God forbid you should be related to that family. You should at least visit us, your mother asked, and leave an address so I know where to find you. There's nothing to find me. I'll be fine. I like the city. You don't get bored there. The son replied cheerfully. You just be careful, son, not to get into fights. Oh, always you, Mom, something that makes up. I only want to eat as soon as possible, because I'll be late for the next bus, Ethan answered, dumping his suit, shirts, and underwear into his suitcase. The son ate with gusto, and his parents watched him with amusement. Their son's bloodline. The daughter has grown up. The boy is on his feet, and he needs his parents only to check in with them from time to time and show them what he has become. How long ago did you celebrate your 16th birthday? All right, I'm out of here, Ethan said. God bless Eddie. And remember what I told you. I forgot about Sophia a long time ago. You really should. There are plenty of beautiful girls in town. Michael only smiled, listening to his son and remembering how hard this son's happiness had been for him. When Ethan left the house, Camille said sadly, Ethan has left again. Now it's just you and me. Why alone? My brother's napping on the sofa. Christina's coming over. Soon the grandchildren will come. Nowadays, girls are clingy. Not like in our time he didn't dare to hang on their necks. Michael laughed. The next day, Camille went to the city and got a job on the railroad. She had to work 3 shifts, receiving construction materials. Now she rarely saw not only her son, but also her husband. Even on holidays sometimes could not meet. Those who accidentally met Ethan in the city said that they often saw him drunk, walking around town, checking out the diners. Goes home and doesn't show his nose. Michael went to see his son at work, sat down, opposite and coldly, bespeaks that not even 10 years have passed. I've been in detention from call to call. Was it for this? The son looked sorrowfully from behind his eyes. He shamefully averted his eyes. I won't live by my conscience. I'm sorry. Camille several times visited her son in the dormitory, but there did not always make him. It wasn't until New Year's Eve that luck struck. Camille and Michael were at home together waiting for their son. He did arrive, but not alone. Along with him walked in a beautiful hair, a girl smiling, friendly. Meet my wife, Ethan announced from the doorstep. The mother shuddered like a wife. Where from? From the city, originally from Minsk region. Works in a cafe as a cook. Anyway, he cooks good food. I won't go hungry. What's your name? Michael asked. Ludmila. Sweet to my heart, Mila answered father and invited me in. Come in. The table is set, just waiting for you. Everyone looked at the young people and wondered, what a beau. Never married, never married. But you have a wife. We got married. But thank God, Camille nodded. Michael helped the unexpected daughter-in-law to take off her coat, led her to the table, showed her the place, filled the glasses with wine, and said, "Here's to the happiness of the young people. Live in harmony and love. May your dreams come true, and we old people will rejoice in your good fortune." You all drank wine. Only Mila barely killed. She doesn't drink. That's good. Not depraved, Camille thought, and asked when was the wedding, son. Yes, we had a wedding. My 2 boys and my 2 girlfriends. We went to a restaurant, had a few drinks, and it was over. Camille remembered that she didn't have a real wedding either. Everyone has their own destiny. So where do you live? Worried, Mother asked. My sweetheart and I bought an apartment, bragged the son, with a movie in his eyes at his father and mother. We have to start building a house, said the father, and us. We'll build. The family has increased. Do we have guests to meet? Michael smiled happily. Let's drink to the new year. May it help all our plans come true. Bitter, Camille proclaimed loudly and solemnly. Mila looked shamefully at Ethan, but he hugged her and kissed her heartily. Michael smiled contentedly and thought, after all, my son has justified the life I gave him. Gave him 12 years of life. In the spring, Mansfield began construction on the subway. The man was still helping out. Even when he wasn't invited to the site, he put up walls. His son helped. Over the summer, they put the roof on, built the furnace, even built a barn to house the livestock. Then my granddaughter Zoya was born. The daughter-in-law moved with the baby to Ethan's parents to help nurse her. Camille gave the baby all her love and tenderness. Michael marveled as he watched his wife. She was up in an instant, happy, as if the feeling of youth had returned to her, and the grandfather himself liked to amuse himself with his granddaughter, listening to her delicate voice. A year later, the daughter-in-law gave birth to another grandson, Jack. The house became crowded and noisy. Camille felt happy. Then came a letter from Camille's older sister, Wendy, who had lived in America for many years. She had already been told the news about her son and grandchildren. Someone complained to Wendy that Ethan was a bad son, not inviting his parents to his wedding. What does he like to drink? Michael knew many of the relatives, out of jealousy, were ready to embarrass a man to make themselves feel more important. Of course, maybe Ethan is not a perfect son, but not worse than others hold the family. Loves his wife and kids. And as for the shot, who doesn't drink nowadays? I was surprised by something else. Living 1,000 kilometers away in America, Wendy was eager to find out about his family, to influence Camille and Ethan. His Michael was persistent in calling him to visit, luring him with his wealth, bragging about the 2-story house where she lived happily with her husband in a rich and free country. In one message, she suddenly wrote Camille, "No need to go. Come alone, I'll show you all of America." She persisted in reminding me that she was childless, which meant that the American inheritance could go to her son Michael and her grandchildren. After all, there were no other heirs. Still, Wendy missed her homeland, dwelling on references to the past. All the more so because she had once had a crush on Michael. He'd felt it at one time and hesitated to choose a wife. He liked the thoughtful, intelligent, well-read Wendy. But Camille was impulsive, selfless. Managed to tie him to herself, however, she moved old age. Michael was afraid to admit that he was gradually losing his sight. The strength was leaving his body. What was next, God knows. However, it was necessary to protect his son and his family. He pulled himself together and wrote a long letter to Wendy and her husband. "Hello, dear Wendy and Noah. Received your letter, for which we thank you heartily. Glad you are doing well and are healthy. Enjoy your life. From seeing friends and from working in the garden. I thank you heartily for inviting me to visit you. However, I'm convinced that I won't be allowed in. You know my background. Besides, only close relatives of the father's mother's brothers or sisters are allowed abroad. I'll tell you about Ethan. He used to like to hang out when he was single. Now that he's got kids, it's hardly ever the same. He's good to me and Camille, to his wife. He celebrated his wedding very modestly, only with his closest friends, as he didn't want to burden us with the hassle. Come and meet his family and see for yourself. He's a good family man. We are happy to have grandchildren in our old age, and we're happy that everything worked out great for our son. Our daughter-in-law is beautiful, neat, and cooks well. She is from the village. Work is not afraid. The only trouble is that old age is already reminding us of its presence. But everything is fine. We wish you success, good health. Greetings from our large Mansfield family. He decided to take the letter to the post office, although the day was frosty, but the breeze was already warm for spring. On the way, Michael went to the store where the villagers usually gathered to wait for fresh bread to be delivered. This time, there were several old men and women gathered there. One elderly man was quarreling loudly with a sales clerk, Shina. See what a bitch she is. She cheated me out of 20 cents. You think I'm old and can't count. Sophia threw 2 coins on the counter and yelled a 20 at you. Just get out of my face. You're getting on my nerves. I'm gonna punch you in the face. I don't care if it's a grandma's grandpa taking the swing. If you try to call the police, they'll soon calm you down. Sophia started threatening me. I'll file a complaint today. You won't cheat here. Enraged, the customer promised. Michael pulled the old man by the sleeve and said, chuckling, still flipping with a hammer. And the collection of what? To make it die. Cholera, it's eternally out of balance. Let's go out for some fresh air. Let's remember our youth. Grandpa's angrily scooping coins off the counter. Michael, you're the only smart man I've ever respected. They left the store. At first, they talked about the farm. Only then the man noticed the mailbox hanging on a pole near the store and got excited. He dropped a letter in it. Come on, I'll walk you home. Come on. The 2 old men stomped along the village, looking at the houses where once lived other people who had long ago moved to the cemetery. Now the children and grandchildren of the deceased walked through the village and resembled their predecessors with their facial features. The cycle of life in nature, smiled Michael. And I'm still living. And how do you feel? He asked. When I woke up this morning, I think my fingernails were the only thing that didn't hurt. I'm all beat up. And when you wake up one day and feel nothing hurts, you'll know you're dead. He laughed. Ugh. What are you saying? The old man was angry. No matter how it is, the time to rest will come. When it comes, then we'll talk. Now come on. What's more fun? How many grandchildren do you have? 2. I have 5. I even have 1 great-grandson. I'll outdo you. The peaceful conversation made Michael think of his complicated life. He walked home and thought that many things could have turned out differently. Christina met him at the house. Why are you frowning? I've been thinking. How long have I lived? I've done nothing good. I don't think I've ever done any sins, but I still have enemies in the village. Who am I interfering with? Christina looked at me for a moment, and then suddenly she burst into tears. It's all because of you. You're the reason I'm alone. You didn't let me get married. You stole my youth. Quietly, Christina came out. Camille. People around. The woman frowned and walked away. Michael nervously invited his hair, helped before him by the influx of fog. Sometimes Michael feared that someday the day would come when the white light would be covered by an unsightly fog. And then no, death would follow. But should he blame fate? He's had a good life, thank God. How many men died, and those who worked at the mine with him? How many boys didn't return to their families? That everyone has his own fate. I chose it myself. I go as far as I can. As far as I can. Soon Michael was sent to the hospital for a checkup. He could no longer work as before. A committee was to determine his competence. The diagnosis was disappointing. Mansfield suffers from a mental illness in the form of schizophrenia. The cost of my sacrifice is exorbitant, the man thought. Michael left the hospital tired and devastated, not knowing whether to be happy or sad that he had been declared mentally ill. This diagnosis is the bitter truth of his life. from which it was difficult to come out alive. But he came out, even if his soul was maimed. Bodies of fallen leaves stirred underfoot. Autumn was moving in on the city. Michael walked down the boulevard towards the train station. Wendy sent more and more letters and parcels from America. It was obvious that she longed for her family, but was afraid to come to leave her settled life. However, she insisted on bringing her grandchildren. Camille made up her mind and traveled to America. Was it scary? Of course, she would have liked to take a family member with her, but Michael wouldn't go. He's been declared schizophrenic. Ethan has a tattoo on his shoulder, and his wife has a different name. The daughter-in-law is taking care of the kids. Wendy's anxious to see her granddaughter. But it's not advisable to take the girl away from school. There was no point in taking Christina with her. It would only spread gossip after the village. After weighing all the circumstances, I decided to go alone. When the papers were prepared, put on Camille's simple black dress, took all the necessary things, put them in a backpack. Weary of the train ride to Moscow, she slept through the entire flight to America. At the airport, she was met by Wendy and her sister's husband, who hadn't seen each other in over 30 years. They didn't recognize each other right away. Wendy took a long look at the people who were coming to meet her, until she realized that the tall, thin, aging woman was her own sister. "Are you Camille?" I answered the younger sister, looking at the small, chubby, pink-cheeked Wendy. "How have you aged? It's disgusting to look at," exclaimed the American. I stare at my sister. I'm tired. I work nights on the railroad, picking up construction materials. And when I come home, there is no rest either. Household, yes, grandchildren. Wendy suddenly cried, hugged her sister and kissed her. "You're my martyr. Meet my husband, Noah." Camille held out her hand to the old man with the dark glasses. "Hello, Noah. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the letters and packages." "Hello," my sister's husband replied, and held out a large bouquet of yellow roses. "Let's go to the car. Tired on the road?" "No, I slept the whole time on the airplane." "Thanks for the flowers." They got into the shiny white car and drove through a city with tall buildings, bright advertisements, and lots of people on the streets. Look, Camille, New York is the richest city in the world. America is a free, happy country where even a working man can buy a big house and live there. Do you also have the opportunity to move in with your family? Your grandchildren will have everything they need. Wendy said inspirationally, "I care about that. After all, they are my blood too." It is true that Noah has kinfolk too. The house will have to be divided, but I think we can make a good arrangement. "I wish to God you'd say that," Camille said. But she was bored with the city. Her heart yearned to go home. Wendy visibly parted. The body on the round face was choosing and NOSIK. Her sister had dyed her hair a golden color, so she looked much younger than her years. To a nice pink and lilac dress, very suitable, picked up in the tone of lipstick. Next to her was her younger sister in a black dress with a gray head. "Felt old and ugly. You look good. I'm glad that you, of all our kin, are lucky enough to live in prosperity. We've had a lifetime of grief to remember. It's all right. You'll get some rest. We'll spruce you up. We'll buy new clothes, and you'll be a goddess." Wendy wants to live young, until she is 100 years old. Noah said mockingly, "Would you like me to go down like a hen and run around you?" "You won't." The wife replied irritably, "I, thank God, do it myself. I do not need to run around me and hide from old age in vain. I'm tired of your philosophy." The wise man was found. They drove out of town, rushing along the wide highway for quite a long time. Wendy kept asking about her family. At last, they entered a small town. There were low buildings with typical red roofs. Unlike New York, there was plenty of greenery and flowers. The car stopped near an attractive two-story house. "This is our house coming out," Wendy said. While Noah put the car in the garage, the sisters walked down the driveway and planted on both sides with colorful roses. Katya's house was really furnished with tasteful rooms, glowing with warmth and coziness. Good, you have with delight, said Camille. Everything shone, shining with cleanliness. Wendy set the pre-prepared dishes on the table, fed her sister from the road, then led her into the small room. This is the room we keep for guests. Getting Camille settled in. All stood on the threshold, looking at the curtains and covers of the cathedral. It's all so beautiful. It's scary to touch, she said. Don't make it up. Lie down, rest, and I'll sit with you. I don't sleep well now. I wake up many times in the night, and then I can't sleep. Tell me about yourself. How are you here? We haven't seen each other for so long. It's okay. It was hard at first. Then I got to know people. Learned the language. I got a job. That's how it was. I got along with Noah. To tell you the truth, I regret that I ever tied my fate to him. They wanted to send me to India to work. I didn't really want to go there. That's when I was introduced to Noah. What, Noah? Camille asked. That's what Noah is called in American. Well, when he found out, he decided to help. He agreed to give me a sham marriage. He wasn't a bad man, but I didn't like his looks. But over time, we became friends. We bought a house together. Noah had the first floor and I had the second. He supported me financially. I got used to him. 2 years later, we got married for real. I got pregnant, but I couldn't carry the baby. I had an operation and was warned that there would be no more children. That's fate, Wendy sighed. But you are happy here, and you have a son and grandchildren. And soon you'll have great-grandchildren. I think your grandchildren are mine too. I comfort myself by understanding that they are in these walls and the beauty of happiness, and in the children and grandchildren life has passed. You can't turn back anything. Wendy sighed. Rest, we'll make another deal. She smiled sadly, waved from the threshold, and left the room, closing the door behind her. Camille woke up out of habit, washed her face early, got dressed, and went down to the first floor. In the kitchen, Noah was sitting at the table drinking coffee. The pleasant aroma of the drink filled. The kitchen seduced. Good morning. The guest said hello. Smells good. Good morning. Noah replied cheerfully. You'll have coffee. Don't mind Wendy. My wife likes to lie in bed. The host got up, seated his guest, poured her coffee, opened the refrigerator, took out smoked meat, 2 eggs, and began to fry scrambled eggs. You always cook for yourself, because I don't trust your sister. She tried to poison me once. God be with you. Noah, what are you saying? Camille exclaimed in surprise. I'm telling the truth. Do you understand? She was living with me. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at some sectarian guys. I'm tired at work and don't realize what's going on with my wife. And she tells me she doesn't want to live with me. Let's sell the house. I told her, live with whoever you want. I'm not selling the house. If your lover loves you, let him take it without the house. She screamed and cried. It happened. I don't want it to happen. That's when it happened. I came home from work on a hot afternoon, got a bottle of beer out of the fridge and took a sip. And there was vinegar in it. Wendy poured it in for something. I ended up in the hospital, had stomach surgery. Could she have done it on purpose or not? I could have been prosecuted. But I loved her. I forgave her everything. Noah put the scrambled eggs on 2 plates. He put one in front of Camille and invited her to have some American eggs. Yes, it's the same everywhere. But you know, Noah, I don't believe Wendy would do this on purpose. I mean, she's always believed in God. Noah asked me to take over the kitchen while I'm here. Asked Camille. With pleasure they ate, drank coffee, smiled at each other. A good relationship was immediately established between them. Wendy entered the kitchen. He grumbled unhappily. An oppressive silence settled at the table. The hostess took small sips of coffee and said without addressing anyone, soon the guests will arrive. We have to get ready. What can I do for you? Asked Noah. Go to the grocery store, buy some milk and fresh bread. Understood, replied Noah, and humming under his breath, the jolly man went out. Death will come to him, and he'll sing songs to her too. said Wendy irritably after her husband. "Why do you keep gnawing at him? He's a kind man, sociable, cheerful. He's a slacker, not a bad man. I hate him. If I could, I'd stab him with a dull knife. Don't start Wendy in the morning. Is that what's tearing your heart out? Do whatever you want. I'm going to go to the apartment for a bit, and I'll see what's wrong. What about you, making the menu yourself?" Camille stayed in the kitchen. She went about her usual business. She did everything quickly and spaciously. When Noah returned from the grocery store, the kitchen was bubbling and smelling delicious. The guests arrived at 12 o'clock, all sitting around the table, eating, praising Camille's skill. At the table, cheeky girl Emma pissed off Camille in every possible way, mocking life in Russia. When the guests finally went home, Wendy went to see them off, and Camille and Noah stayed at the table. "That relative is sad. People have forgotten how to be happy and cheerful," said the host. In the morning, Wendy came to her sister's bedroom and sat on the bed, complaining of insomnia. She really looked tired. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Thank God, I sleep well. I don't sing at home every day. I go to bed late and get up early. I'll rest at your place like at a resort. Listen, I keep wondering how Michael let you go. What if you stay here? You know, we don't care about ourselves anymore. As long as the kids and grandkids are happy, and you can stay here with me if you need to, I will. Even if you don't see your husband again until you die." Wendy asked in surprise. "How long do we have to live? Don't you love him? You never loved him." Wendy shouted indignantly. "I put up with everything. Never betrayed him, never reproached him, never demanded anything. I waited for Michael from all prisons, from all roads. You know how to make a man's head spin. My old grandfather is capable of nothing, and he's being questioned to do something nice for you. Noah is a good man. He's trying to please me as a relative. You're sly." "But I'm not stupid," said Wendy. "I'm not leaving you at home. I'm taking you to the Russian convent. There you will sit and wait for my death and inheritance for your grandchildren. How will they bury me? Then dispose as you wish of what I will leave you in the monastery." The sister marveled. "Can I do that?" "Why not? You know what? This isn't a very sincere speech we're having. I realize you're still alive and well. Wendy, I wish you live a long, long life, and my grandchildren are groomed and fed. They'll be fine without your inheritance." Oh, I'm offended already. "Get in the car. Let's go home," said Wendy. "Why would I be offended? You invited me. I came, I saw you, I talked to you, and thank God. It's time to go home. People will laugh at me if you go that fast. Let's go shopping for presents. Do whatever you want," the sister said indifferently. The next day, she and Wendy went to the supermarket to buy presents. In the evening, Camille was awakened by a touch on her shoulder, opened her eyes and saw Wendy, who said guiltily, "You're asleep." "And I can't sleep. Something's keeping me awake. I can't figure out what it is. Tell me about your grandchildren." "Nice kids. My granddaughter is learning to play the piano. She draws beautifully. They're friends with each other. That makes me happy. It's hard for me to imagine your life," Wendy said sadly. "We have everything here. There seems to be no problems, but there is no happiness." "What did you see happiness in?" "I wanted to have a big friendly family of a husband, beloved children and grandchildren. And I have none of that. How did you, sister, take my destiny? Destroyed me." Bitterly, said Wendy. Camille sat up on the bed and asked what was what. "You have no idea. I really don't know what you're talking about. You have your own life, but you stole my destiny. It was I who should have been with Michael." With reproach and with tears in my eyes, said Wendy. "But what is he to be with you? Not to listen to you, not to tell you himself how he lives with you. He chose me. I've loved him all my life. What's that got to do with you? I don't understand. I've loved him all my life. I've only thought about him. And he writes me wooden sentences without feeling." Camille looked at her sister. She knew that Wendy had once liked Michael, but she couldn't imagine that her older sister had carried those feelings through her life. Michael is a different person, Camille said. He didn't love you, he loved me. You can understand me. You're the one who drove him to this state. You made him schizophrenic. If I had been with him, he would have been a wonderful man. He had everything going for him. Natural intelligence, charm. You poisoned his life. What kind of soul do you have? Your head and your soul are empty. I hate you, your son and your grandchildren. I hate you all. Wendy rushed to Camille, grabbed her by the throat, began to choke her. Her sister broke free, turned away. Is that what's bothering you? Go get your Michael. I'll see how you handle this job and the ideas. Camille picked up her bag, started dumping her stuff. Are you going to go? You're not going anywhere. I'm gonna send you off and bury you here. I'm going to Michael. I know what he loved all his life. I'm the only one. Are you crazy? Camille answered calmly. Noah came into the room. He said, "What's going on here? Get out of here like a rotten bitch." Wendy shouted angrily. Camille, what happened? Asked Noah. Nothing. I want to go home. Please help me buy a ticket. Michael sat on the bench basking in the last rays of the autumn sun. Footsteps were heard. He turned his head and was surprised to recognize the familiar figure of his wife. Though he couldn't see her face yet, had she come back from America so soon? He wondered. I don't have a sister. Did you have a fight there? Camille said nothing, heading for the door. What you go with, you come back with. What do you want? Then go on your own. Why did you come here so angry and good? I don't need anything. How are the grandchildren? They're fine. Yesterday my daughter-in-law came to visit. She said they're all healthy. That's our greatest treasure. Camille's back. Maybe she brought a present. Christina shouted, I brought you a present. I'll give it to you later. Camille was quiet. It had been a joyless trip. The return was the same. Would you tell me anything? Asked her to live well. Americans live well, but even their happiness is not given to everyone. Happiness does not depend on money and the fact that you have a 2-story house with a mirrored bathroom. You see, everyone is unhappy in their own way. And if someone is rich, they can still come up with 100 reasons to be unhappy. You tell me about Wendy, how she asked for Christina. That's what I'm talking about. She's got a house, 2 cars, but no joy. There's only anger, irritation, old age, and fear of death. Sister fights with Noah. Noah takes offense. That's their life. Camille took some beautiful colors out of her bag and gave the handkerchief to Christina. Thank Wendy for not forgetting about me. It's not Wendy. I bought it for you in Moscow, and my sister didn't give it to me. She promised to send you a package. The woman lied, not wanting to talk about her fight with Wendy. All right, I'll wait. Michael, leaning low over the desk, taking notes. Even though he was almost blind, he kept a diary. Today there's an entry in his notebook. It's a warm, sunny day. Fall is late. Camille came back and said that America has everything but happiness.